Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to the reading room once more. We've got another debate dissection going down. This one has all the science, and we've already started the. You've turned into some sort of cyborg. I don't know what's happened. It's, I think the Terminator is after you. I think
It's possible.
that's a cool effect. That's a cool effect. I like it.
Thank you. Peter's been teaching me OBS sorcery.
Oh, okay, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. Peter's got some all the OBS tricks, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, but this one, I love Sean Carroll, and I tolerate William Lane Craig. So yeah, it should be a really good one. We've already had sort of people wrong about science in the chat.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so. Oh dear, Daryl, a model is a guess. I don't even know what to say to that, mate. Yeah, it's Maya, so good to see you. So good to see you, Beamsy. Always a pleasure. Daryl Frost, you're always welcome here. You really need to know what science is, and when we make a model, it's not just a guess. And come on, mate. Electric Monk, Sydney Raptor, welcome. Binge Thinker, welcome. So good to see you. So good to see you all. But this debate, I don't know if you've seen it before. I saw it ages ago, but I've sped it up to like a great deal. And what's funny is that William Lane Craig seems to be talking at normal rate now. I didn't realize how slowly the man talks.
Right? I had to do that with Hitchens too.
I considered and Sean Carroll, he's fine, but I put it up to 2 times, and I'm like, wow, William Lane Craig sounds like he's talking like a normal person, and then sort of I went what, and then put him back to normal speed. I'm like, wow, he is glacial in his talking.
Mm-hmm. He thinks it adds a certain gravitas to make his words heavier.
I'm sure he does. How are you, by the way, Ember? How have you been?
Oh, alright. Busy day. Just did my oldest birthday party. Their birthday was actually Friday, but we did the party today, and we had a. Thank you. I'll let them know. But yeah, we had to dodge a tornado. That was cool. That doesn't happen often on the shores of Lake Ontario, so the kids were
just for a moment. I wondered if that was like metaphorical or literal. You know what I mean? Like.
It was actually a tornado warning, but the kids, their phones all went off with the alert, seek immediate shelter, and they're like, oh boy. I'm like, relax. But before we get going, everybody remember to like, subscribe, share, do all those fun things.
Oh, you've really gone for the OBS thing. That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to get this teed up. Let's share. And so I love this debate because it's what happens when a cosmologist goes up against a philosopher, sort of thing.
I'm super excited. I've only ever seen clips of this one, and so the whole thing should be freaking great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of I've seen it before, but not for a while, so it should not be exactly fresh in my mind. It should be nice to watch. And I do subscribe to Ember here as well. I can't think of anything else I could do, and I do apologize. I'm a little bit nasally. I'm sort of coming down from a cold, which really was horrible last week. I really was annoyed. It's so inconvenient. It's so inconvenient.
Your body gets all disrespectful.
I know, right? But we'll probably sort of tangent too much. I will start. So let's get this underway. Yeah, less tangent. We need to sort of stay on track. We've got this horrible habit of going way off track. I mean, I don't blame you. I do it half the time. I think we're equally good.
No, you should definitely blame me. I am awful.
No, I think, look, I would not be honest if I said I didn't contribute to the problem. At least, halfway, if not more. Okay.
Ooh, there's my favorite emoji.
So this is 1.75 speed. Keep that in mind, right? This is William Lane Craig.
I'm not hearing him.
You're not?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know. That might have gone on for quite some time. Let's see. Let's just try that again. Let's just try it again. Run it back. Salty do-over. Beamsy, don't you get snarky in the chat, Beamsy. I'll take your lunch away.
We'll use the emojis.
Welcome in this doc if you do want to, mate. That's not a problem. You're always welcome to come on in. You're usually part of these. Yeah, you give him the band hammer, mate. Give him the band hammer.
His wrench is as big as mine. What can I do?
Yeah. Need to get you a bigger wrench, Ember.
Good evening. It's an honor to be taking part in a forum featuring such distinguished scientists and
go.
philosophers. Thank you very much.
Okay.
In his recent book, Where the Conflict Really Lies, Alvin Plantinga distinguished 3 ways in which science and theism might be related: areas of apparent conflict, genuine conflict, and concord. I take it as obvious that there does not exist even apparent conflict between contemporary cosmogonic theories and theism. Contemporary cosmology would therefore seem to be an area of obvious concord between science and theism.
So Alvin Plantinga is a philosopher, right? So he's quoting a book from somebody who's a philosopher, say that and theology to sort of say there's no conflict between theology and cosmology. And it's kind of like, well, wait a second. Why is the theologian deciding this? Like, why isn't a cosmologist deciding this? It's kind of a really weird reference to make. I don't know. He seems to sort of just be making an appeal to authority, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't. It's hard to say if he's only referencing, so it's hard to say if he's going off of the person's reputation or their work, because he hasn't really gone into it.
Yeah. Okay. It's probably one of his friends, to be honest with you.
Tonight I want to defend an even stronger claim, namely that the evidence of contemporary cosmology actually renders God's existence considerably more probable than it would have been without it. This is not to make some sort of naive claim that contemporary cosmology proves the existence of God. There's no God of the gaps reasoning here. Rather, I'm saying that contemporary cosmology provides significant evidence in support of premises in philosophical arguments for conclusions having.
Do you think that's the case? Do you think he's not making a God of the gaps argument?
He may stick to what he actually said in this case. It's just hilarious to me that in the debate with Hitchens that we did a month or two ago, he literally made the cosmological argument proves God exists.
Yes. But he's sort of giving a probabilistic argument or an abductive reasoning here, that it is more probable that God exists. But the problem with abductive reasoning is that it's really hard to tell probabilities on sort of one universe. So the sample size is 1. So you've got to make some Bayesian assumptions in order to get that probability, which, I'm sure he is doing. And I'm sure if they're wrong, then he's completely wrong. And you can throw that Bayesian analysis straight out the window. Okay, just 1 second. Sorry, I'm having things pop up. Go away, Discord. Go away.
Damn it, Discord.
I'm gonna put myself on Do Not Disturb. Just give me 1 second. We're professionals here, Ember. That's highly
plus to
trained.
OBS. When OBS is open, Discord goes into streamer mode and mutes all notifications.
That's true.
Theological significance. For example, the key premise in the ancient Kalam cosmological argument that the universe began to exist is a religiously neutral statement which can be found in virtually any textbook on astronomy and astrophysics. It is obviously susceptible to scientific confirmation or disconfirmation on the basis of the evidence.
Okay, let's go back to that, because there's a word in there.
Conclusions having theological significance.
That I don't know if you noticed. Oh God, or I'm sorry.
Oh, what have you done?
What's the word in there that's been smuggled into that Kalam? Can we see it?
I believe, and this William Lane Craig himself is credited with this modification, is began. No? That's not what you're looking
No.
for?
No.
Cause? Brought?
No. Are you just going to say every word
Yes.
one by one and two? It's transcendent. It's transcendent.
Oh, well, shit. I didn't even get that far in the sentence because I was stuck on began because the began part is Craig himself added this. And I thought it was funny when he says this is a centuries old argument. It was, but then he edited it. He put began in there so that he could say, oh, well, God didn't begin to exist, so God doesn't need a cause.
I think the original Kalam had sort of very little to do with God. It didn't have any mention of God in the premises or the conclusion. So the original Kalam was everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause, right? So I think that sort of saying, hey, a transcendent cause kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
why does it have to be? Why does it have to be transcendent? Like when you're talking about a cause and you say, hey, well, it has to be transcendent because the universe didn't exist. Well, why couldn't it be not a part of the universe? And the reason why he's using transcendent is because he needs God to be have a finger in the pie of the universe, if you will. He has to have God getting into the universe, because if he says, hey, well, the cause is outside the universe, somewhere in the cosmos, the greater bounds or something, then he can't have his God, right? So he wants his God to have to be in this universe. So he sort of said, if the universe began to exist, then there is a transcendent cause. Doesn't need to be transcendent.
And in the words of J. Mike, there's no logical entailment that requires that.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I come at it from the science end of things, whereas Mark's very, very philosophy on this. We don't even have consensus that the universe did begin to exist. We don't have a solid concept. It's for all intents and purposes, we cannot distinguish whether the universe began to exist or the universe preceded the event that we call the Big Bang, and it was simply a change in time or space or any number of properties that caused our current instantiation of space-time to begin to exist.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the soundness of the I get that, and it's completely valid. I mean, I'm simply looking at because it says if the universe began to exist. So in here there is a loophole for saying, hey, this doesn't apply if the universe didn't begin to exist, kind of thing, right? So that doesn't violate any of the logic of the syllogism, because it says if the universe began to exist, not the universe began to exist.
Well,
right?
That's premise two. That's the whole of premise two, and we don't know that that's true.
Well, that's true. I'm just looking at the first one by one, and I'm sort of saying, hey, the very first one is that you've smuggled in transcendent when it doesn't necessarily have to be transcendent. It could be transcendent, but do you notice that nothing in this gets you to a god?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't even end with a god. It just says a transcendent cause.
Yeah. It
so
could
yeah,
be,
we'll
Gremlins, Roland the closet goblin. It could be the one snowflake that started the avalanche. Yeah.
Magic. It's a magical stone called the Blarney Stone, which isn't made of rock or stone. It's actually made of magic. I've got to make a Blarney Stone emote. I've got to.
Nice.
I admire that you have so many ideas for emojis that you can put out polls on them. I don't know what to do with mine. It's terrible. The universe began to exist. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Sean Carroll would agree with you, actually. I don't think he would agree.
A religiously neutral statement, which can be found in virtually any textbook on astronomy and astrophysics. It is obviously susceptible to scientific confirmation or disconfirmation on the basis of the evidence. So, to repeat, one is not employing the evidence of contemporary cosmology to prove the proposition that God exists, but to support theologically neutral premises in philosophical arguments for conclusions that have theistic significance. In tonight's discussion, I'll focus on two such arguments: the Kalam cosmological argument from the origin of the universe, and the teleological argument from the fine-tuning of the universe.
Yeah, so we've got the Kalam, or the cosmological argument, and the teleological argument, which are two of they're the theist playbook arguments. So I think the second one is a lot stronger. But I think William Lane Craig likes the first one better, to be honest with you, mostly because
for sure it's his favorite. But he going against a cosmologist, he has to go with the teleological, and this is not going to go well for him. But
yeah.
Consider first the Kalam cosmological argument. 1. If the universe began to exist, then there is a transcendent cause which brought the universe into existence. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, there is a transcendent cause which brought the universe in.
William, we're just going to call him Billy. Billy, you've gotta prove that it's transcendent, mate. Like if it is outside the universe in the cosmos somewhere, then it's not transcendent. And you don't. I mean, I know that you have to have it as transcendent for the, but you haven't shown that. I don't.
Yeah, as a for example, if you can imagine the space outside the universe. I know that's not technically within our domain, but we're humans. We can imagine things. So imagine, this vast reach of not universe, and there's two other universes floating along, and they smash into each other. Everything inside both collapses, and ours pops out. That's a cause outside our universe that has nothing to do with any kind of super being.
Correct. That's external to our universe. So when you say transcendent, it's both sort of in the universe and external to it. It transcends the boundaries of the universe, and there's no justification for that.
To existence. By the universe, I mean that reality which is studied by contemporary cosmology. That is to say, all contiguous physical reality, which currently takes the form of space.
Wait, all contiguous physical reality? How do you know there's no reality outside the universe? How did you come up with that, Chestnut? Reality and universe are not synonymous. They may be. The universe may be all that is. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. I'm not saying that there is. I know or even believe there's anything outside the universe, but reality and universe are not synonymous. How do you know there's no extra dimensionality? I don't. Yeah,
there's a whole lot we don't know, and you can't just plug God in there.
Time and its contents. I take it that 1 is obviously true. Rather, the truly controversial premise is 2. Traditional supporters presented philosophical arguments in support of 2, which for me constitute its primary warrant. But they're not the subject of tonight's debate. Rather, what's emerged during the 20th century is remarkable empirical confirmation of the second premise from the evidence of astrophysical cosmogony. 2 independent but
he keeps saying cosmogony. What the hell is cosmogony?
Let's Google that.
Because
I have heard the term before, but I think just from him.
I love learning new words. Cosmogony, the branch of science that deals with the origin of the universe, especially the solar system. And the plural noun is cosmogonies. Cosmogony. He's got a vocabulary, does this man? He definitely does.
Yeah, so it's
a creation myth or cosmogonic myth is a type of cosmogony. Okay, so it's any origin of the universe, including creation myths. Okay, so he's kind of using this catch-all. That's cool. I like it. Okay, I like the word. I like the word.
Yeah, fair enough. Any origin story. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful.
Closely interrelated lines of physical evidence support premise 2. Evidence from the expansion of the universe and evidence from the second law of thermodynamics. In saying that the cosmogonic evidence confirms 2, I am not saying that we are certain that 2 is true. Too many people mistakenly equate knowledge with certainty. When they say that we do not know that the universe began to exist, what they really mean is that we are not certain that the universe began to exist. But of course, certainty is not the relevant standard here. The question is whether 2 is more plausible in light of the evidence than it's contradictory. Professor Carroll reminds us, science isn't in the business of proving things. Rather, science judges the merits of competing models in terms of their simplicity, clarity, comprehensiveness, and fit to the data. Unsuccessful theories are never disproven, as we can always concoct elaborate schemes to save the phenomena. They just fade away as better theories gain acceptance.
That's a semi-fair point.
Yeah, but sort of this is where theists jump on it and say, hey, well, and I'm thinking of a Mormon that I've run into that sort of says, well, science doesn't prove anything, so you can't tell me anything, or you can't make any knowledge claims whatsoever. So it depends, and sort of reading, I've read a bit lately on Karl Popper, his fallibility, that science doesn't prove things in the way that you mean proof as in it is set in stone doctrine that can't be challenged, right? So if you're talking about using proof as a absolute knowledge that is unequivocally correct, nothing is ever proved in science, everything is up for questioning. If you mean prove as in it overcomes a series of challenges that would establish it as an incredibly high level of certainty that it is correct, then yes, it does prove things, right? It overcomes its burden of proof, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends how you're using that word. And so a lot of theists like to say that well, science doesn't prove anything, so it can't tell us anything. And that's not true. As one person said, all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. Like just because we have a model that's slightly wrong, like Newton's gravitational laws, doesn't mean we can't use that model to make things work, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd argue with Sean on this point, and flat Earth, for example. Now, technically, it's not disproven just because we know the Earth is a globe. As he says, you could concoct an incredibly complicated theory so it could be both a globe and flat at the same time. But that goes way beyond the pale of what we might consider a reasonable idea.
I don't think so. I think I agree with Popper's falsifiability. I think you can disprove things. I think that is possible in science. You can say, hey, this disproves that model. Like it is thrown out. I think that everything is never proven, but you can disprove by using the evidence. I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I think that when I run into all kinds of people, and some people say, hey, you can never know anything because you never know when you're correct. And there's a long chain of thought behind that. But I think as long as we're accepting sort of empiricism and rational thinking, you can disprove things, but never 100% prove them in science. And I think it's more that it's the difference between science and religion. It's the reason why science isn't a religion is there is no, for lack of a better term, dogma, which is ideas or concepts that are unquestionable, like an unchallengeable. They are central pillars of that institution that can never be pulled down. Everything can be pulled down in science. If you want to have a go at a pillar, if you want to have a go at like the theory of gravity or relativity or, germ theory, have at it. Whereas, religion doesn't do that. You can't be adhering to the religion and trying to pull down the pillar of God, basically.
Yeah, I'd love a simpler relativity. The version we've got does some cool tricks, but if we could make it simpler, it would be nice.
It would be nice, but the universe and the reality isn't in the business of making things simple for us. Apparently, that isn't a requirement of reality, is to be like a lot of people like, well, God's simple, it's easy. Well, but is it true? That's the question. It's very simple to say, hey, the reason why my socks keep vanishing is sock gnomes. It's kind of hard to make a chaos theory equation on how socks disappear. But
did you know people all over the world have myths about sock gnomes? That means they must be true.
They must be true. Yeah, but it's simple to fill in the explanation, but we want to know whether it's true or not. Yeah.
Science cannot force you to accept the beginning of the universe. You can always concoct elaborate schemes to explain away the evidence. But those schemes will not fare well in displaying the aforementioned scientific virtues. Even many who have expressed skepticism about premise 2 admit that it is more plausibly true than not. For example, in my recent dialogue with Lawrence Krauss, he volunteered, I bet our universe had a beginning, but I am not certain of it. Based on the physics that I know, I'd say it is a more likely possibility. This is to admit precisely what cosmologists like Alexander Vilenkin have contended all along.
He's being honest.
He's citing Vilenkin. I wonder if he's trying to lay a trap, because Vilenkin is the one who did the multiverse math that showed the probability. Okay. Like, since he's going for teleological argument later, one of the best counters to teleological argument is we don't know if there are a gazillion universes, then the odds of one universe having the exact values of ours doesn't require a fine-tuner. It had to happen somewhere. And so Vilenkin is one of the bigger names behind that hypothesis. So to bring him in now, I wonder if he's like setting up something for when he gets to the teleological argument.
That's a good point. Yeah. Like, so maybe poisoning the well on Vilenkin's multiverse, or the
maybe.
Sort of. What was Vilenkin, string theory? Maybe.
No, just straight up multiverse.
Okay, multiverse, to sort of say, hey, but Vilenkin thought it was multiverse and he was wrong, kind of thing, maybe.
Maybe. Well, we don't. That's the thing. We don't know. Vilenkin, he's well respected, but at the same time, he's also kind of like, yes, grandpa, because multiverse is utterly unfalsifiable until we can get outside of our own universe and look. So it's a fun idea.
Yeah. Well, and I can't help but feel, because he's not actually presenting any evidence that God is behind all of this, right? I mean, what's he actually presenting that a God was behind this? He's more doing a God of the gaps. Like he said he wasn't, but he is edging towards that way, right? I'm not going to say, hey, he's doing a God of the gaps, but I feel like he's dancing, dangerously close to the precipice here. Like, the
precipice.
Help me. Thank you, precipice. I don't know what's wrong with me today.
English is hard.
English is hard. I usually do not have a problem with that word.
We should all switch to Spanish, because, then we get siestas.
We tried. There was a language called Esperanto that was made in like the 70s, which was an amalgamation of French, Spanish, and English. And it was supposed to be a universal language, sort of common language to everybody, which was a great idea. It was a fantastic idea. But nobody learnt it, and it sort of just collapsed. But there are still Esperanto speakers in the world today. It's apparently a very easy language to learn. Yeah, and I want to give a big shout out to Pinworm. Hey. Thank you. Lots of love, Pinworm. Billy sounds like a bigger jerk on a faster speed. Yeah, basically. You're not wrong. and lots of love to Pinworm. Pinworm's he's edging and dangerous. Maya. Gonna have to put you with Beamsy. Just watch out.
The evidence makes it more likely than not that the universe began to exist. Consider first evidence from the expansion of the universe. The standard Big Bang cosmogonic model implies that the universe is not infinite in the past, but had an absolute beginning a finite time ago. Although advances in astrophysical cosmology have forced various revisions in the standard model, nothing has called into question its fundamental prediction of the finitude of the past and the beginning of the universe. Indeed, as James Sinclair has shown, the history of 20th century cosmogony has seen a parade of failed theories trying to avert the absolute beginning predicted by the standard model. Meanwhile, a series of remarkable singularity theorems has increasingly tightened the loop around empirically tenable cosmogonic models by showing that under more and more generalized conditions, a beginning is inevitable. In 2003, Arvin Board, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin were able to show that any universe, which is on average in a state of cosmic expansion throughout its history, cannot be infinite in the past, but must have a beginning. In 2012, Vilenkin showed that cosmogonic models.
Sorry?
That's a big if, though. He's talking about now that he's brought Guth in, he's talking about the expansion, which it's a thing that still bugs the hell out of me, because it's a band-aid on Big Bang to make the time scale that we've predicted work. We don't have any reason to justify why expansion happened. It's purely mathematical, and it just frustrates the hell out of me. It may have happened, but like theology, we don't actually have a reason to think so, other than if we don't do it, our model doesn't work. And I hate that.
Well, okay, I'm gonna put this up because it's relative. Yeah, and the jerky thing is that he is sort of saying, hey, it's a greater probability for God, and I feel like it's sort of, what is the probability for God? Like you're sort of talking about these models which we don't know which one it is, or even if we've got the right one, but you're sort of saying, hey, so the probability is God is higher, but you haven't given any reason why the probability for a God is higher beyond any kind of naturalistic reason. So you're kind of trying to get around God of the gaps by saying, hey, but it's more probable because we don't know how it's happened. It's more probable that it's a God. And I don't think that works either. I think that you've got to show like something supporting God instead of just stuff in the opposite and then saying, well, it's more probable to be God. Because I could say, hey, all of these models don't work. It's more probable to be a magic stone called the Blarney Stone. Right? Yeah. Like anything could fit into here. So it is still God of the gaps, even though he claims it isn't. I feel like that's very kind of dodgy because he's sort of going, well, because I'm only saying it's probable, it's not God of the gaps. Well, no, you're making an abductive God of the gaps argument, not an inductive God of the gaps. It's still God of the gaps.
Yeah, he's trying to like waltz between God of the gaps on one side and incredulity on the other. And oh man, I know he's got some dancy feet, but I don't think I don't think so.
Yeah. Good point. It is an argument from incredulity that it has to be, because you're sort of saying, hey, it can't have happened naturally. Well, why not? Like, even if every single model we have is wrong, that does not one iota get you to it's more likely to be a God. It just could be that we don't know how it happened.
Just yesterday I saw an article. I didn't have time to read it, unfortunately, because it looked really interesting, that physicists believe they may have discovered a fifth force that affects only a certain kind of muon somewhere down, like below our current understanding of the quantum level. And maybe that'll turn out to be like that room temperature superconductor and it's just nothing. But maybe it's something. So we're always learning more, and our view of the universe changes by orders of magnitudes from time to time. Just 99 years ago, our understanding of the cosmos went from just the Milky Way to 16 billion light years, you know?
Right. And that's an incredible leap in knowledge, right? That's an insane leap in knowledge. So people go, oh, well, we'll never understand, the start of the Big Bang. And it's like, really? How do you know what we will know 1 million years from now? Like, if our civilization survives that long, of course, but look optimistically. If our civilization does survive, how do you know that, what we will know and what we won't know? I wouldn't certainly make a claim of what we will know and not know millions of years from now. I think that's really ridiculous. But most of the people I'm talking to that sort of say that thing think that the world's going to end in a cataclysm because their god's dead and then alive undead child is going to come back and spank everybody. So what do I know? It's just
very angry space wizards.
Kind of weird. Right. And plus all of that research going on, just ask Maya about it, because apparently they're trying to open a portal to hell at CERN. And if you haven't seen that episode on Maya's channel, it is hilarious to have a physicist, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, come on and talk about the claims that the CERN Large Hadron Collider is a portal to hell is actually hilarious, just to see the look on his face. And a big shout out to Maya as well. I might drop a link for channel because she is beautiful and amazing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Bad Science Sundays you can watch over there, and they're all just delicious.
Yeah, so subscribe to Maya. She's going to be huge because she is doing great stuff over there. But you know what? I don't want to tell people to go do stuff and have stuff. And I'm just a lot better at plugging other people's channels than my own. I don't know why that is. I have this weird thing.
It's
which do not fall under this condition, including Professor Carroll.
Sorry?
It's the humbleness.
I don't know. I've got to do something.
His own model fail on other grounds to avert the beginning of the universe. Vilenkin concluded none of these scenarios can actually be past eternal. All the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning.
When was this debate? This is 2012. I think there is, and here's the thing, like the eternal universe model, there's been a lot more contention over it lately among physicists. I know that Sean Carroll was one of the biggest proponents, don't get me wrong, but you know, I think Craig's making a mistake to try and go up on the cosmology instead of the theology with Sean, because Sean Carroll's going to rip him to bitch, right? You know he is. He is one of the great physicists of our age, and cosmologists of our age. Billy Lane Craig. I just want to know when this was actually debated.
Was it a debate?
2014. Yeah, it's not too.
This debate,
old.
Right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this debate.
Okay.
So I just wanted to know how old this reference was, but yeah. So probably I would say that William Lane Craig he'd probably best move on from this. If he's still using this, he probably isn't anymore. But I'm sure he can find some papers saying that the universe had a beginning. It is something that's hotly contested in physicist circles.
The Borguth-Vilenkin theorem proves that classical spacetime, under a single, very general condition, cannot be extended to past infinity, but must reach a boundary at some time in the finite past. Now, either there was something on the other side of that boundary or not. If not, then that boundary is the beginning of the universe. If there was something on the other side, then it will be a non-classical region, described by the yet-to-be-discovered theory of quantum gravity. In that case, Vilenkin says, it will be the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, sure.
I mean, well, it depends. Like,
yeah,
if there is something beyond the singularity point, for lack of a better term, we don't know how far that goes. It could be another finite period. It could be a series of finite periods, or it could be an infinite period, at least as we perceive time. We have no freaking idea.
Yeah, because the thing that William Lane Craig is missing is that if you have the Big Bang as a point in between those two, like you had the two areas, the universe as sort of we perceive it or know it, right? And then the region 2, so classical space-time, right? And region 2 is quantum gravity region. So if space-time, and the important part of it, time, started with that line, then how do you get a finite anything in here? There's no time, right? Because if time starts with the Big Bang, which is this inflationary line here, then you can't say, hey, there was a finite amount of time here. There's no time at all. So there's no reason why this could not be eternal. He's made a huge mistake.
And let's not forget that we don't actually have a comprehensive theory of quantum gravity. It's a thing we would like to achieve, but we do not actually have. So we can't describe the properties of what a universe under those conditions might look like.
Of course, there might be some other property that acts as in causal relations and sort of has a time functionality, but we don't perceive. We have no idea. All of this is, I mean, to say speculation is a bit of a stretch, but it's all sort of very hypothetical. And we can do a lot of sort of calculations on whether it's true or whether we can discount it, but nobody knows for sure. But to say, hey, space-time started from here, but this would have been finite. How can it be finite without time? I don't understand that. But you could certainly say, how could it be eternal without time? Yeah, that makes sense, Billy. That makes sense. So,
by the yet-to-be-discovered theory of quantum gravity. In that case, Vilenkin says, it will be the beginning of the universe. Think about it. If there is such a non-classical region, then it is not past eternal in the classical sense. But neither can it exist literally timelessly, akin to the way in which philosophers consider abstract objects to be timeless, or theologians.
Why are we going to what theologians consider timeless? What?
I think he's trying to spin some word salad into looking like he made a point.
Yeah, I don't know why we would go to, it can't be timeless as theologians would think timeless. Why are we going from cosmology to theologians? Like, if you want to talk cosmology, talk cosmologist like Blanken. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But if you're going to say, hey, it can't be timeless because I have a philosophical definition of timeless that says that, this and that and the other. No. I mean, I've heard before, it can't be timeless because everything is causal kind of thing, but we've observed acausal properties like spontaneous atom decay, which appears to have no cause and sort of suggests that there is things that happen completely acausally, like it doesn't have a cause, it just occurs.
Or even reverse causally, we have observed some quantum effects that appear to have the effect precede the cause, and then the standard model also calls for certain kinds of particles, tachyons among others, that go the wrong direction through time. That's where the one electron theory comes from, that nobody actually buys into, but nobody can knock it down either. Right.
Yeah, so you're talking sort of reverse entropy kind of thing, like against the flow of time. But and all of these, like, I mean, they're kind of, you can sort of say, oh, but how do you atheists or how do you people know that's true? We don't. But we're not the ones saying that these can't be a possibility and it must have been a god. This is the thing. You're making all of these assumptions and saying, hey, it's more probable if it's a god. Only if you make these assumptions, right? You're making huge assumptions and then saying, hey, well, the probability bears out. Yeah, what if you're wrong on your assumptions? But you won't entertain that because you want the probability of a god to be higher.
Take God.
Actually, this was what I ran into with the interview with Christopher the other day. Every objection I put, he's like, oh, you're trying to just make it not true. And it's like, no, it's just when you sort of make these assumptions that it could not have been this and it could not have been that, how do you know that? Like, it just seems like to me that a lot of these assumptions of it couldn't have been this and couldn't have been that are just incredulity because you want your explanation to be true.
Yeah, it's kind of a circular. It's like a big circular argument. If you add enough steps and enough assumptions, it may not appear to be a circle, but ultimately what it boils down to is you're making assumptions based on your wish for God to be the most reasonable, and when you come all the way around, oh look, God's the most reasonable because I assumed that in the beginning.
Yep. That you're then coming to your conclusion, which is, what do we call that? We call that confirmation bias. That's what we call that. That's exactly what that is.
Timeless. For this region is in a state of constant flux, which, given the indiscernibility of identicals, is sufficient for time. So even if time as defined in classical physics does not exist at such an era, some sort of time would. But if the quantum gravity era is temporal, it cannot be extended infinitely in time.
Sorry?
He's asserting something that nobody knows anything about. He's saying, well, even if it wasn't classic time, there would still be things that are close enough to time we might consider it to be time. No, we don't know that. We have no fucking idea.
Yeah. No, it's sort of, I think he's making statements on things that haven't even been observed, much less, their properties understood. These things are ridiculously hypothetical. But we don't even have
comprehensive mathematical descriptions yet. They're not even fully hypothetical yet.
That's true. But you, a theologist, want to make confident assumptions on their properties more than the cosmologists. And I'm wondering why.
For such a quantum state is not stable, and so would either produce the universe from eternity past or not at all. As Anthony Aguirre and John Tihias argue, it is very difficult to devise a system, especially a quantum one, that does nothing forever, then evolves. A truly stationary or periodic quantum state, which would last forever, would never evolve, whereas one with any instability will not endure for an indefinite time.
Well, what do you mean by time there? If you're talking before the Big Bang, then you're talking before time. So how do you put time in there? This is some of the problems of making these assumptions. You're applying local temporal statements outside of local temporal time. Like, how?
Yeah, and it gets worse than that. Like this quote we could delve into, we could peel it apart layer by layer. It'd take us a freaking hour, but we could. But it it doesn't even matter. We can set that aside because he's using a statement about quantum systems within our universe, under the rules of our universe, to attempt to describe something that is definitionally outside of our universe and may have entirely different laws and processes and so forth.
Right. Yeah, I'm not claiming to know that sort of a causal, because if you have an eternal universe where some kind of time does not exist, that's why it's eternal, then your sort of thing will, something does nothing forever, you'll say, hey, you need time to have a cause. Yes, but in quantum mechanics, some things are acausal. Do I know that for sure? No, absolutely not. But some things are acausal. So it would be the region of space that you're calling the quantum field, like the region of quantum mechanics, would be both infinite and instant at the same time, right? There's no time, so it can't be any amount of time, right? So when you're saying, hey, it lasts forever, yeah, kind of, but without time, it's also instant. Like, trying to talk without time is so ridiculously hard to wrap your mind around.
Yeah, it just it fucks up our whole causal system of understanding things. Like if you really want to warp your brain, try to consider the perspective of a photon, because since a photon is traveling at light speed, it experiences zero time. So from the moment it's emitted by its star till the moment it's received by your retina, it's the same moment from the photon's point of view. Not that a photon has a point of view, but you get what I mean.
Right. Yeah, and sort of, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really considered that. That nothing would change in that photon's perspective. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interesting. Okay, you just sidetracked my head. I had something, and then you just you so did, and I'm so happy about it. Like that's awesome. I think that's great. Yeah. So, here's the thing. No cosmologist is sort of saying, hey, we know this to be the case. But William Lane Craig is. He's saying we know it to be a god. This is where the strength of your claim has to be brought in and say, hey, why are you expecting people who are saying, hey, we don't know for sure, to have a definitive explanation, while people that are saying we definitely know it's God to ride on no explanation whatsoever? Meet your burden of proof. Meet your damn burden of proof, Billy. Billy. Meet your damn. Didn't we need to get more emotion into these because that sells well or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, right. We're supposed to be why I oughta.
Why I oughta turn your eye. Look, I got. Look, I'm gonna come clean with you. I have a metrics panel and stuff. I pay no attention to it whatsoever. I'm a bad YouTuber. I really am. I'm gonna come clean with everybody.
You mean you just make stuff you want to make all willy-nilly, like some kind of creative or something?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never pretended I know what I'm doing.
Hence, the quantum gravity era would itself have to have had a beginning in order to explain why it transitioned just some 13 billion years ago into classical time and space. Hence, whether at the boundary or at the quantum gravity regime, the universe probably began to exist.
Probably. You're assuming.
The way he phrased that pisses me off.
Yeah.
Like, it happened just 13.7, from our point of view, it was 13.7 billion years ago. But from this other theorized quantum state, who the fuck knows? We're not using the same clock.
Yeah, and I feel like he's nesting a whole lot of problems. It's almost like a slippery slope argument kind of thing. It's weird because he's sort of like, well, it probably had this, and it probably did this, and it probably. If you stack up enough of these probablys, you come to a very, very small chance of happening, right? Like, because the chance that you're going to be wrong on something is going to be higher and higher the more you add these probablys.
What we need here is a shit ton of turtles.
All the way down. I gotcha. All the way down. I like turtles.
Consider now the evidence of thermodynamics. According to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy in a closed system almost never decreases.
Second law of thermodynamics. Okay. All right. I'm wincing in pain. I feel like he's not going to get yeah. All right.
Given the naturalistic assumption that the universe is a closed system, the second law implies that given enough time, the universe will come to a state of thermodynamic heat death, whether cold or hot. Given that the universe will expand forever, it may never reach a state of equilibrium, but will grow increasingly cold, dark, dilute, and dead. But then the obvious question arises: why, if the universe has existed forever, is it not now in a cold, dark, dilute, and lifeless state? P.C.W. Davies gives the obvious answer. The universe can't have existed forever. We know there must have been an absolute beginning a finite time ago. The universe.
So, no.
No.
I appreciate that Professor Davies is a well-accredited person, but no, simply saying, well, it just can't have, that boils down to nuh-uh. It's interesting that Craig makes the point from the opposite perspective we commonly hear it, where a number of theologians make the argument that we don't even need to look at the second law of thermodynamics, just our understanding of how time works. If the universe existed for an infinite period of time in the past, we would never reach today, because there's so many yesterdays. We would just never get here. It's a Zeno's paradox kind of thing. But Craig's doing it the other way around. If the universe had existed an infinite amount of time in the past, we'd have already burned out all the energy and such. But there's a lot of hidden assumptions in there, too. While it is true that an expanding gas cloud gets cooler, that's not strictly applicable to the universe, because there are gravitational centers, and there may be means of recycling matter. We don't know for sure. We also have no idea what the fuck dark matter is. That... Just to throw a random idea out there, total speculation, but that could be proto-matter that hasn't yet condensed into hydrogen, thus giving us more supply for more matter later. And again, total speculation. That is not science. I'm just poking holes in what Bill is saying.
Yeah, and sort of, so by this, he also probably means the local presentation of the universe. So before that, so after that quantum state had ended, or the Big Bang happened, which is the rapid expansion. So if there is that quantum state William Lane Craig demonstrated, he's not talking about that state. He's talking about the local presentation of the universe. He's not talking about the cosmos around it, which could have existed forever. He's not talking about anything else. He's simply talking about the local presentation of the universe. But what I think Craig's doing here is he's trying to shore up the holes in his credibility. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Don't get me wrong. I think he's very credible in philosophy, but not in cosmology. So he's kind of grabbing these people to say, hey, don't argue with me. Don't argue with William Lane Craig, the theologist and philosopher. Argue with Plantinga and Paul Davies and, all of these other people kind of thing. They argue with Vilenkin kind of thing. So I think that's what he's doing. And yes, I would say that is kind of an argument from authority, kind of. Except, he's simply referencing what these people have said. And he's trying to reduce it to a probabilistic argument. I don't know. I feel like there's a argument from authority in here somewhere. But what we're not getting, and I want to point this out again, what we're not getting is anybody saying from science that it's a God doing it. right? Where's the part that says, hey, there is a God doing it? That there is some sort of supernatural thing that is causing this to happen, or this has a supernatural origin because of this evidence. A lack of evidence for any of these hypotheses is not evidence for a God. So I feel like Billy is kind of really letting down his own side. He's more just pointing out the flaws with the other side and not presenting any evidence for his own. So, I mean, it's a tactic that we've seen time and time again. It's why sort of Hovind won't debate creationism. You know, he'll only debate evolution. Yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of attack the other side and never have to defend your own position, I think is what he's doing.
Versus energy, says Davies, was simply put in at the creation as an initial condition. By contrast, Professor Carroll's solution to the problem confronts serious obstacles. He imagines that the overall condition of the universe is a state of thermal equilibrium, a sort of de Sitter space, but that random fluctuations spawn baby universes which pinch off to become wholly independent spacetimes. We find ourselves in one such baby universe in a state of disequilibrium. Let me raise two concerns about this model. First, not only are the production mechanisms of such baby universes admittedly conjectural, but such a scenario violates the so-called unitarity of quantum theory by allowing irretrievable information loss from the mother universe to the babies. Stephen Hawking, apologizing to science fiction fans everywhere, came to admit there is no baby universe branching off. As I once thought, the information remains firmly in our universe. Second, Professor Carroll's solution provides no convincing answer to the Boltzmann brain problem. Since the mother universe is a de Sitter space.
Yeah, and Sean Carroll and Hawking disagreed on that point.
Hawking was not right. He was not the god of science. He was not right about everything.
Right. No one's the god of science.
Yeah. I mean, I myself have pointed out that Hawking radiation, he fucked up his formula. He's got it adding mass to the universe and subtracting it from black holes, but that in his formula there should have been a plus or minus, because it could be the positive particle or the negative particle that falls in. And if it's the positive particle that falls in, then we're subtracting mass from the universe and adding it to the black hole. It works both ways. This Hawking radiation can radiate into the black hole, and it should mathematically average out to about the same both ways. But that's a whole other thing. The point is, Hawking, brilliant mathematician, not perfect.
And let's not detract from how great these people are. We have had great men and women in science over the years who have been completely wrong about certain things and 100% right about others. I mean, Newton is the best example. He was a genius, maybe one of the smartest people that has ever lived on this planet. And he believed in alchemy. And he believed nonsense about alchemy, like he could turn lead into gold and silly stuff like that. Just because you get things right doesn't mean everything you say is right. Again, another difference between us and religion. Just because you have some good ideas doesn't make all of your ideas right. We have no prophets. We have no deities. Everything stands on its own merits. Hey, Jorge. Really good to see you.
I also think he's misusing the Boltzmann brain, because that was never intended to be a serious thing. It was just a way to measure the relative absurdity of proposals. If you put forth a model and you compare it to the possibility that a brain could spontaneously emerge from nothing with a memory and the belief the universe is real, if they're equally probable, then it's a form of Occam's razor, sort of. It's just a really specific way of putting it.
It's the same as last Thursdayism kind of thing, or last Tuesdayism kind of stuff. Like, so what's the chances that a brain just spawns in a void and sort of just has this idea of this concept of what it is and what it's doing, kind of thing. I've never paid the Boltzmann, much thought, unless it applies to solipsism kind of thing. I think that it sort of I think kind of undermines our basic axioms about the world that we need in order to sort of function. I've never given it a great deal of credibility. He seems to be really taking it for a walk, though. Yeah.
Well, I think it's because Carroll weighed in on the idea.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. It was one of his things that he, shoot, how did he put it? I think it was something along the lines of, on a long enough time scale, you can apply the Boltzmann brain not just to the largest structures of the universe, but to smaller things within the universe, like a galaxy or even a planet.
Yeah.
So if you have an infinite time scale and no entropy, then we could all be brains in vats together.
Of course, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I acknowledge the problem of hard solipsism. It doesn't mean I have to believe it. Like, I acknowledge that it's a problem. But I like the idea of just pragmatically and sort of using all three prongs of the Munchausen trilemma. We kind of just have to deal with the apparent universe in front of us. We don't have a choice. Like, it's just, yeah.
It brings us back to the central problem of theism in the first place. Why would we have any reason to think so? Like, you can knock down other models and hypotheses all day long, but until you give me a reason to think so, your suggestion is never going to be the most probable.
Right. But the thing that I love that I encountered recently was, even if you discover you're in simulation theory and you break out of it, like I think Shane is he's sort of talking about the most famous example in our society, which is the Matrix. If you bust out of it, how do you know the next one's not the Matrix? Like, that's what I wanted them to do in the new Matrix. Don't know if you've seen it. I won't spoil it too much. But I want them to be in another Matrix, like a dream within a dream kind of thing, Inception style. I thought that would have been beautiful. Like, they thought they were outside, and actually it's just a safeguard to make you think you're outside. Like, there's no end. Like, and if you break out of that one, how do you know? And then it just keeps going and going and going. Turtles all the way down.
Exactly.
Yeah, Matrix is all the way down. Yeah, absolutely, Shane.
Which thermal fluctuations occur. And since baby universes grow into de Sitter spaces themselves, there's no explanation in the model why there exists a genuine low entropy universe around us, rather than the mere appearance of such a world, an illusion of isolated brains which have fluctuated into existence out of the quantum vacuum. These and other problems make Professor Carroll's model less plausible than the standard solution that the universe began to exist with an initial low entropy condition. Skeptics.
Well, yeah, but not necessarily. I mean, I agree that this model of baby universes spawning off, that requires a few extra levels of ontological commitment to buy into. But this over-obsession with information theory, it's, first of all, people often get it very, very wrong. It's difficult to put into words, but there's this principle. It is not a law. It is not a theory. It's barely a hypothesis because there's nothing substantive to it. But there's this principle that information cannot be created or destroyed. And yet we know on a practical level that's not true. If you take a book, it contains information, and you burn the book, even though all the atoms continue to exist, the emergent information contained and encoded in the language that is now disrupted by the scattered atoms has been destroyed.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And the thing that I wanted to say was, like, how are you applying this probability to your own hypothesis that you're just not a brain that popped into existence and thinks that a god did it? Like, why is that less likely than popped into existence and has all these cosmological ideas? I don't get how you sort of a god overcomes any of this, because we to sort of say, hey, but Sean Carroll doesn't have any real evidence for his sort of hypotheses here. You don't have really any for God either. I don't know. It's very, very strange. Do you exclude your own views from that Boltzmann brain example?
Indeed.
Maybe.
might hope that quantum cosmology might serve to avert the implications of the second law of thermodynamics. But now, a new singularity theorem formulated by Aaron Wall seems to close the door on that possibility. Wall shows that given the validity of the generalized second law of thermodynamics in quantum cosmology, the universe must have begun to exist, unless, as in Professor Carroll's model, one postulates a reversal of the arrow of time at some point in the past, which, he rightly observes, involves a thermodynamic beginning in time, which would seem to raise the same sorts of philosophical questions that any other sort of beginning in time would. Wall reports that his results require only certain basic...
I don't think cosmologists care about raising philosophical questions, Craig, in the way that you're saying there. I don't think cosmologists are going, well, wait, that raises some important philosophical questions. Yeah. Ember, you're very still. Are you still there, or have you...
I suspect my system is frozen up. I don't know if you can even hear me right now, but
well, I can hear you, but you're
doing a quick restart.
You're doing a really good ventriloquist act. I gotta say. Oh, there you go. There you go.
I think we've caught back up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I froze up entirely for a minute there.
Turn off your torrents, mate. Like, just come on, get it under control.
It's the tornadoes. They're taking down our internet towers or something.
Oh no! Yeah. Well, you know they're caused by gay people, right? So have you been living in a gay area? Is that what's happening?
Literally, yes. I mean,
Okay.
I'm queer as it gets, and my housemates are a married gay couple. So there's a lot of fruitiness in this building.
Oh, cute. Look, I loved it when the churches blamed the tornadoes on the gay people, and there was a tornado. I think it ripped through Louisiana or something like that, and it destroyed everything but the sort of gay quarter. I thought it was wonderful kind of thing. I thought it was so good to see them say that, and then that happened. I can't remember where it was, but yeah, I thought it was so good. Like, yeah, it was it was, yeah, in Louisiana, no, it was a flood. A flood destroyed the home of a Christian lobbyist who preached that God sends natural disasters to punish gays. Like,
Whoops.
So good. You can't, like, it's just so delicious when that kind of stuff happens. I love it so much,
concepts, so that it is reasonable to believe that the results will hold in a complete theory of quantum gravity. Thus, we have good evidence, both from the expansion of the universe and from the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is not past eternal, but had a temporal beginning. So the second premise of the Kalam cosmological argument receives significant confirmation from the evidence of contemporary cosmology. We have been a good argument for a transcendent cause of the universe.
No.
Turn now to the teleological...
No. No.
I'm willing to grant, for the sake of argument, the universe had a freaking beginning. Get on with it, Bill. Mm-hmm. But no, you don't get to automatically jump to transcendent cause. Sorry.
Yeah.
Argument from the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have been stunned by the discovery that the existence of intelligent, interactive life depends upon a...
Stunned by the discovery of intelligent, interactive life? You mean humans? Were we stunned by that?
Do we stun ourselves? I mean, I think some humans are quite stunning, but...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that's what he means.
Yeah, I mean, May is in the chat and she's stunning. It's just, I don't think we were just stunned by the discovery. Is that seriously what he said? Am I getting this wrong?
Incomprehensible. Now, there are three possibilities debated in the literature for concepts, so that it is reasonable to believe that the results will hold in a complete theory of quantum gravity. Thus, we have good evidence, both from the expansion of the universe and from the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is not past eternal, but had a temporal beginning. So the second premise of the Kalam cosmological argument receives significant confirmation from the evidence of contemporary cosmology. We have been a good argument for a transcendent cause of the universe. Turn now to the teleological argument from the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have been stunned by the discovery that the existence of intelligent, interactive life depends upon a complex and delicate balance of fundamental constants. And
okay. So it still depends on... I just didn't go far enough. Okay. Look, you can be stunned by life if you want. I'm stunned by life often. That's okay, Billy. That's all right. But it relies on these constants. Yeah, this life does. This particular form of life does on those constants. Would there be other life if there were other constants?
Well, even then, we're still not entirely sure. Like, because we don't have other constants to work with, we can't test.
Correct.
But many people have made a strong mathematical case that several of these so-called constants, first of all, there's not nearly as many as Craig asserts. Like if you make an alteration to one of the four fundamental forces, that's going to adjust several other properties of the universe. But it seems likely that there's a range of values that would not significantly alter life as we understand it. Like he's going to say gravity has to be exactly this. It probably doesn't. We don't know for sure, but it probably doesn't.
And I guess if gravity was slightly different, the whole point is that things wouldn't form or things wouldn't. And we don't know for sure, and we don't know what a reality would look like with those constants in a different value, or even if one could emerge at all. If multiverse is right, then that universe would just collapse again, and then, presumably another one would form. You're working on so little information. And this is where I want to pull back to Bayesian analysis, because he's basically making these assumptions that if the constants can't be changed and it wouldn't have life, then, kind of thing. So that if, and then here's the probability of it. Well, only if those ifs are right. And you haven't in any way backed up that they are actually correct.
Quantities, like the gravitational constant or the amount of entropy in the early universe, which are fine-tuned to a degree that is literally incomprehensible. Now, there are three possibilities debated in the literature for explaining the presence of this remarkable fine-tuning: physical necessity, chance, or design. The question then is, which of these three alternatives is the most plausible? On the basis of the evidence, we may argue, one,
he's already assuming the fine-tuning, the constants, etc., and that bugs the hell out of me. But I think this is also a false trichotomy. I can't quite put my finger on an exception because I'm so hung up on the just bald, unsupported assertion, these values must have been fine-tuned, yada, yada. He's jumping several steps down his syllogism without any justification to do so. Have you ever seen an argument where premise one is a non sequitur? Because I think this is one.
Well, so I think physical necessity is sort of talking about determinism, like deterministic process. Chance is sort of pure arbitrariness, like just a or design. But okay, so let's go to premise one. Physical necessity, chance, or design. If this is a trichotomy, we should be able to come up with something that is not one of these things.
I'm not sure that design deserves to be included in there. Like, if it were designed, then that falls under physical necessity because it was built that way.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. If that is determinism, then yes, like you've determined that it will be in a certain way. Yeah, I can see that. I think naturalism probably would fit better there than physical necessity, right? So a naturalistic explanation,
yeah,
or
because
naturalistic
chance would fall
process
under that as well. I don't see why it has to be only one thing or the other. Like, some things could be a physical necessity, like, say, the force of gravity. Force, for lack of a better term. If it's not just in the right range, the universe collapses before it expands, or it expands too fast and no galaxies form. But then other things could be due to chance, like the, my frickin' brain, when the matter condensed back together and there was X amount of matter and X amount of antimatter, and then the matter and antimatter annihilated, and it left us with the matter that we have. There was that matter asymmetry. That could have been by chance, even if the gravity part was a physical necessity. We could have had a universe with more matter or less matter or no matter at all. Because then you're in quantum effects. That could be by chance, even if the gravity is physical necessity.
Okay, so my question was, what does physical necessity mean? Right? What does that mean? So just from reading here, apparently it's very ambiguous. necessity is used to characterize objective events may be connected. Right. So ontological necessity. Right. So he's basically saying that when we're talking about a necessary thing as opposed to contingent, a necessary thing is uncaused, right? It doesn't have that cause behind it. It's necessary. Whereas a contingent thing is something that's caused. Like, for instance, I pick up my juggling ball here, and the cause is contingent kind of thing. I'm contingent on being born and coming through my life. So necessary, physical necessity, he's talking about a necessary cause that is physical, chance or design. And I don't think that's true. I could say, hey, it was a magical necessary cause.
Good point. It doesn't even necessarily have to be physical. It doesn't have to be magical either. It could be the energy properties of whatever the hell state preceded the current universe.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we know nothing about it, so we don't know how we would apply the word physical, if we could even at all. And sort of, as far as physical's concerned, like, there's a bit of ambiguity among that as well. So is quantum foam physical? Is it? It's because it's not matter, but physical is sort of part of physics. So I would say it is, but it depends how he's using that word, right? That physical necessity is so ambiguous. But what about magical necessity?
Yeah.
What about
miracle?
Right. Well, that's sort of what you can put in there as another possibility to the trichotomy that you're talking about. So he's sort of he's edging. William Lane Craig is always edging. He's sort of I don't. There's other things you can suggest that don't fall into any of those prongs, so it falls apart right there. I don't think it's a non sequitur. I think it's just a false trichotomy, basically. It's not those categories. And you're right, it probably should be a dichotomy. It probably should be, natural causes or design, but that's obviously a false dichotomy.
Yeah,
right?
I just don't like the term fine tuning because it smuggles in some concepts. Like, the values of the universe, they aren't necessarily fine-tuned. By saying they're fine-tuned, you're asserting it's like when Ray Comfort says creation requires a creator. He's smuggling in this idea of someone tuning the knobs.
Daryl, that's not the point. We're not arguing that it's designed. They are. Yes, design will have some variation, but so will naturally occurring things as well. So
it does raise some interesting points, though. If there were some kind of supernatural engineer behind the scenes, then what are the failure conditions of the universe? What breaks down, and in what way are there fail safes? Is it fail operational? Is it if a star goes out at the wrong time, does the whole thing collapse? It's a fascinating thing to think about.
It could be information from a previous universe. Yeah, we don't know, like, man. That's a very good point. It could just be the follow-on from a previous universe that sort of imparts in a natural way, imparts those constraints to the next universe coming.
Yeah, because that way it's kind of a physical necessity, but not really, because it's not necessity in the way Craig means. It's contingent on the initial conditions from the previous universe. I like that because that's a solid fourth prong.
Yeah.
It's a contingent necessity. No, a physical contingency. You know what I mean.
A physical contingency. Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. 100% correct. Then and then he'd probably point to infinite regress and sort of say, well, where's the end of it? We don't know. That's the whole point. Like, you're the one saying that you have the necessary thing, but refuse to talk about it. You're just saying, hey, you can't tell what's necessary, therefore God. Yeah, and plus, notice, can I just also say, nowhere in this does this say God. Where's the God in this argument?
Well, he's going to try to say, well, we have a transcendent cause and we have a designer Who does that make you think of? I mean, he'll do it more skillfully, more eloquently than Frank Turek does, but it's the same argument.
So what I want to point out is that you could have interdimensional aliens and fulfill this design criteria.
Sure. They'd be both transcendent and designers. Or, to go to the Matrix thing again, the programmer's the next reality up who created the simulation.
Right. Yeah. They would be intelligent designers and transcendent. There's no problem with that. It's just, but design, that implies a designer, which implies God. How does it imply God? The only reason why it implies a God is because you started with God. You started with that as the conclusion you want to reach. It's confirmation bias. And I keep pointing this out and they go, no. You would never have come to this conclusion if you did not believe in a God already. That's the problem.
The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. 2, it is not due to physical necessity or chance. 3, therefore, it is due to design. Consider then the first alternative, physical necessity. This alternative seems extraordinarily...
So, just something I want to point out, and just the thing. So, this is syllogisms, right? Syllogisms 101. What William's got here is a perfectly valid syllogism, and the difference between validity and soundness. And I've been noticing, especially young Earth creationists and pre-sups especially, go to, well, if I've got a valid syllogism, then I'm right. And that is not true, because the validity of a syllogism is whether it makes logical sense, right? This syllogism made logical sense. There's nothing illogical about it. But in order for something to be true, it has to be sound as well. The premises have actually got to be true, or most likely true. So the whole idea when someone presents you with a syllogism and you can't find an error in the logic, you don't have to, right? They'll say, some people will say, oh, where does it logically make no sense? It doesn't have to. You can just say, hey, I reject this premise, because you have to demonstrate that is in fact true. And that's soundness, right? And it's the difference between a formal and an informal fallacy. A formal one is an error in the logic. And William Lane Craig is a doctor of philosophy. I would not expect him to make an error in logic. However, that doesn't make it true. I can make syllogisms for unicorns and Bigfoot. It doesn't make them true. The premises also have to be sound. And I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, an argument can be invalid or unsound and still true. It's like the fallacy. Just because you fucked up the argument doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong.
Well, yes, that's correct. The conclusion that you draw can be correct, even if the argument is terrible, sure. But, really the way we look at it is it's whether we sort of epistemology is whether we should believe that argument based upon sort of the premises and conclusions.
Yes. If you fuck it up, you failed to demonstrate it.
Right.
Plausible because the constants and quantities are independent of the laws of nature. The laws of nature are consistent with a wide range of the values of these constants and quantities. For example, the most promising candidate for theory of everything to date, superstring theory, or M theory, allows a cosmic landscape of around 10 to the 500th power different universes governed by the present laws of nature, so that it does nothing to render the observed values of the constants and quantities physically necessary. So what about the second alternative, that the fine-tuning is due to chance? The problem with this alternative is that the odds against the universe's being life-permitting are so incomprehensibly great that they cannot be reasonably faced. In order to rescue the alternative of chance, its proponents have therefore been forced to adopt the hypothesis that there exists a sort of world ensemble or multiverse of randomly ordered universes, of which our universe is but a part. Now comes the key move. Since observers can exist only in finely tuned worlds, of course we observe our universe to be fine-tuned. So this explanation of fine-tuning relies on 1, the existence of a specific type of world ensemble, and 2, an observer self-selection effect. Now, this explanation, wholly apart from objections to 1, faces a very formidable objection to 2, namely the Boltzmann brain problem. In order to be observable, the universe need not be fine-tuned for our existence. Indeed, it is vastly more probable that a random fluctuation of mass energy would yield a universe dominated by Boltzmann brain observers than one dominated by ordinary observers like ourselves. In other words, the observer self-selection,
but he can't demonstrate that.
Yeah.
That's No, you can't just say it would be far more probable because, again, it's a demonstration of absurdity. It hurts my head the way he's misrepresenting things and twisting things and whatnot. Like,
Yeah.
no, he's referring to the strong anthropic principle. We observe the world that we see because if the world we see were different, we wouldn't be here to observe it. And that's a philosophical problem because which is cause and which is effect. But
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, in practice, it doesn't really matter. But it's also interesting to me that he's kind of reversed the normal argument. Instead of saying there's no reason to believe in a multiverse, he's saying we've predicted a multiverse, and if that's the case, then everyone else has a problem. My model is stronger for it. Like, how do you get there, my guy?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, and when you talk about these sort of probabilities, and like you said, the strong anthropomorphic thing, like the chances of you and I sort of being here right now, like the chances of us surviving and every single ancestor surviving to have children is infinitely small, right? There's no probability that we would have every single ancestor survive to an age to have children, have the children, and then they survive, etc., throughout the entire lineage. And the chances out of the two people, Ember and I, to meet each other and sort of talk and then create if you break down anything of those chances, it becomes almost zero, so close to zero to be impossible. It's a mistake to assume and look at one event and say, what is the probability of that one event, right? It's a mistake because the probability of that one event is 1. It's of a sample size of 1. It happened once. That is the way to do probability studies. Now, as I said, you can do Bayesian, right? And you can sort of go, hey, if. But if any of your ifs are wrong, you can throw that straight out the window. And we don't know enough about the universe to tell if any of these ifs are wrong or right or multiverse or something. So, but then to go on and say, hey, well, what's the probability of my ifs being right? Well, then you're loading up probability after probability. So it's getting smaller and smaller the more you add, and you are adding a ton of ifs.
Yeah. I'm still gobsmacked by the just random assertion that a Boltzmann brain solution is more probable. Like, you can't just say that. You have to show it.
Right.
Because that is a low fucking probability.
Yeah, so it does seem like sort of just an appeal to incredulity. Like, we don't know how multiverse works and we don't think it would work. Well, okay, but that's not really an argument against it. That's just your incredulity. I don't know. It's just really weird when they want to get into fine tuning because you're sort of trying to do probability with almost no data whatsoever. It's a mistake. It's 100% a mistake.
Yeah, it's a coin flips. The odds of 1 heads are 50-50. The odds of 10 heads are it's significantly lower. But there's a trick that some magician skeptics. Matt Dillahunty infamously did this once at one of the conferences he went to. He had everyone in the audience stand up and flip a coin, and everybody who got heads had to sit down. The people who got tails kept standing, and then he did it again, and heads sat down, and so on, until after somewhere between 10 to 12 coin flips, he got to just one person left standing. And he said, see, this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the probability of blah, 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 blah. Even though the probability of any one of you being that person is, 1 in 1,000 or whatever the case may be, somebody still was that. Someone did that 12 flips in a row, So every time you flip a coin, you're going to get a result, and that fucks over this it's improbable the universe could have happened this way argument entirely, because the odds of getting a specific result may be up for debate, but what we're really talking about is we got a result, and the odds of that happening are 100%.
And I was talking with an amazing friend of mine, Simos Funk, who was sort of saying, and we're assigning an equal probability to all values of this fine-tuning. Like gravity could be all these equal values. And it's an equal probability that it can be this value, this value, this value, this value. How do we know that the probabilities of gravity being within a certain range are not weighted, right? How do we know that there's a much more likely chance of G, being its constant, or the speed of light being, 300,000 kilometers per second? How do we know that the probability of that was 90%, right?
Yeah.
And that the probability for other ranges in a bell curve went down, right? How do we know that? Because when you're saying, hey, the probability of light being this one value, you're saying, hey, it could be 300,000, it could be 250,000, it could be 450,000, you're assigning equal values to all, equal probability to all values along there. How do we know they're equal probability?
Yeah, it could very well be a bell curve, like you said, or as I myself have pointed out a number of times, we don't know any of these values even can be different.
Right. Or inherited from another universe that collapsed. We have no idea. We don't know. This is the whole point. But William Lane Craig is claiming to know. He says that a god, scribbled it down in his little pad and then, took his wrench and took it to the universe. Well, prove that, not sort of pointing out what we don't know.
Yeah, if he can demonstrate we can save a whole lot of time. If he can just demonstrate the source of his transcendent knowledge, instead of trying to argue it into existence. The fact he has to resort to this kind of makes the entire case right there, but whatever.
Yeah.
Vacuous. As Robin Collins has noted, what needs to be explained is not just intelligent life, but embodied, interactive, intelligent agents like ourselves.
Evolution does that all by itself, Billy. You don't need to look any further, mate. What? I don't.
Yeah, it's weird that he'd go that route, because it leads people such as ourselves to think of evolution, which demonstrates that naturalistic, unguided processes can still result in intelligence. So,
social interaction, exploration, and anything that you just named, it can be explained with evolutionary process easily, incredibly easily. And there's still some processes going on that we probably don't understand. I don't see why we would have to appeal to a god creating the universe to explain why humans interact with one another. Birds interact with one another. I don't. What are you talking about? This man.
Appeal to an observer self-selection effect accomplishes nothing, because there's no reason whatever to think that most observable worlds, or the most probable observable worlds, are worlds in which that kind of observer exists. Indeed, the opposite appears to be true. Most observable worlds will be Boltzmann brain worlds. Since we are
No.
What?
No, if you're going to go with equal probability distributions, most possible universes will have no observers at all. But of course, he's smuggling in terms again. He's saying most observable worlds will be Boltzmann brain worlds. But no, we don't have any reason to think so. Like, again, it's a standard for absurdity. It's here's where Occam's razor cuts kind of thing.
Yeah.
We can, with relative confidence, assert there are 0 Boltzmann brain worlds, even in an infinite cosmos, because it's just not going to freaking happen.
Right.
Presumably not Boltzmann brains. That fact strongly disconfirms a naturalistic world ensemble or multiverse hypothesis. It seems then that the fine-tuning is not plausibly due to physical necessity or chance. Therefore, we ought to prefer the hypothesis of design, unless the design hypothesis can be shown to be just as implausible as its rivals. And I'll leave it up to Professor Carroll to present any such objections.
Oh, he's going to have objections, mate. I mean, the whole idea from design is the purpose of the design, which is to provide a living space for us. So the sheer waste that is occurring to make a massive universe with, galaxies colliding and supernova exploding just to house us suggests against design. That's a bad
very
design.
Much so. Yeah, the design is very bad. Also, it's weird that he's setting this up as a kind of argument from incredulity. He's saying, here's a reason number 1 is no good, here's a reason number 2 is no good. Number 3, I have no reason to support it. I'm just shifting the burden over to my opponent to try to knock that down.
Yep.
You have nothing to support it? Really? So they're all equally implausible, and that's the best you've got?
So how is this not God of the gaps, right? How is it not God of the gaps? Even if you're just saying, hey, it's more probable to be a God, you're not saying it's more probable because of this evidence. You're saying it's more probable because the other, the cosmological models that we have aren't satisfactory to you, or aren't satisfactory to anybody, maybe. But that's not probability added to your God. Because there's infinite amount of possibilities out there that it could be. So it doesn't change the odds of it being your God. You've got to give evidence that increase the probability that it's a God. Because if all you do is detract from other models, there's infinite models, ones that we haven't come up with. There's spiritual models, there's magical models, there's all these things. It doesn't get you it doesn't even get you to a greater probability of a God. So you have to increase your odds, not decrease your opponents. I was going to say something else. I've lost it.
It happens. It may come back up, though.
Yeah, I just don't see how this isn't God of the gaps. I just don't see how. I'm sorry. Maybe William Lane Craig thinks if probabilities involved, it just can't be God of the gaps. I don't see why. I just don't see why.
In summary, then, it seems to me that the evidence of contemporary cosmology provides significant support for key premises in 2 philosophical arguments for conclusions having theological significance. Thus, the existence of a creator and designer of the universe seems to be significantly more probable in light of contemporary cosmology than it would have been without it.
I also want to start with a confession that my goal here is not to win a debate. The discussion we're having tonight does not reflect a debate that is ongoing in the professional cosmology community. If you go to cosmology conferences, there's a lot of talk about the origin and nature of the universe. There's no talk about what role God might have played in bringing the universe about. It is not an idea that is taken seriously. My goal is to explain why we think that. You may or may not agree with me at the end, but you should be able to understand why we cosmologists have that view. And it comes down to a conflict between 2 major fundamental pictures of the world, what philosophers would call ontologies: naturalism and theism. Naturalism says that all that exists is one world, the natural world, obeying laws of nature, which science can help us discover. Theism says that in addition to the natural world, there's something else, at the very least God, perhaps there are other things as well. I want to argue that naturalism is far and away the winner when it comes to cosmological explanation. And it comes down to 3 points. First, naturalism works. It accounts for the data we see. Second, the evidence is against theism. And third, theism is not well defined. I'm going to be emphasizing this 3rd point because if you ask a theist about the definition, they will give you some very rigorous sounding definition of what they mean by God, the most perfect being, the grounding for all existence, and so forth. There are thousands of such definitions, which is an issue, but the real problem is not with the definitions, it's when you connect the notion of God to the world we observe. That's where apparently an infinite amount of flexibility comes in, and I'm going to be inveighing against using that in cosmology. So I think I can make these points basically by following Dr. Craig's organization, starting with the Kalam cosmological argument, and unlike what he said I should be doing, I want to challenge the first of the premises, that the universe began to exist, it has a transcendent cause. The problem with this premise is that it is false. There's almost no explanation or justification given for this premise in Dr. Craig's presentation, but there's a bigger problem with it, which is that it is not even false. The real problem is that these are not the right vocabulary words to be using when we discuss fundamental physics and cosmology.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. He slipped in the Feynman reference. He's just, he's like, he didn't even say this side is incoherent. When you make them start providing definitions, it just falls off into absurdity immediately. He's like signaling at things, but he's not stomping on them the way Craig was with his points. I fucking love this.
Yeah. No, Sean Carroll is amazing. And the whole point is, and this is the thing, like he's using terms in philosophy that cosmologists don't like. So what's before time? Nonsense. Just complete incoherence of that statement. What is before time? I love you, Sean Carroll.
This kind of Aristotelian analysis of causation was cutting-edge stuff 2,500 years ago. Today, we know better. Our metaphysics must follow our physics. That's what the word metaphysics means. And modern physics, you open a quantum field theory textbook or a general relativity textbook, you will not find the words transcendent cause anywhere. What you find are differential equations. This reflects the fact that the way that physics is known to work these days is in terms of patterns, unbreakable rules, laws of nature. Given the world at one point in time, we will tell you what happens next. There's no need for any extra metaphysical...
That's induction, by the way. What happens before, what we can tell you what happens next, induction. And there's problems. Hume sort of has problems with induction. I get it. The philosophers kind of can dig down and say, hey, it's foundationalist. Well, if it doesn't work, then stop using your mobile phones and your computers and everything that you do rely on, because that was all done with induction. So if it doesn't work, why are you using them? It'll work until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, we'll address it then. It's kind of one of those things, well, if it comes up, we'll address it when it's a problem, but it hasn't been a problem
or when we find a better thing, like Newton. We knew right off the bat that Newton didn't quite work. Newton's gravity, I should specify. Like, it didn't successfully describe the orbit of Mercury. We knew there were problems, but it was what we had, so we carried on until something better came along.
Baggage like transcendent causes on top of that. It's precisely the wrong way to think about how the fundamental reality works. The question you should be asking is, what is the best model of the universe that science can come up with? By model, I mean a formal mathematical system that purports to match on to what we observe. So if you want to know whether something is possible in cosmology or physics, you ask, can I build a model? Can I build a model where the universe had a beginning but did not have a cause? The answer is yes, it's been done. 30 years ago, very famously, Stephen Hawking and Jim Hartle presented the no-boundary quantum cosmology model. The point about this model is not that it's the right model. I don't think that we're anywhere near the right model yet. The point is that it is completely self-contained. It is an entire history of the universe which does not rely on anything outside. It just is like that. The demand for more...
I'm so glad they fixed his mic. That was starting.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Was that on purpose? Was that hassling atheists?
It was a transcendent cause trying to make people not listen.
It was. I'm sure it was transcendent to the microphone. Yes. Have you ever heard of PEBCAC before?
Mm-mm.
That's an IT term. It means problem exists between keyboard and chair.
I have heard that before. Yes, it's very funny. It doesn't come up in my world often.
Yeah, but I mean, my life has been sort of lived in that world, so yeah, it's definitely...
This model that fits the data is a relic of a pre-scientific view of the world. My claim is that if you had a perfect cosmological model that accounted for the data, you would go home and declare yourself having been victorious. You might also ask, could the universe be eternal, since Dr. Craig talked about this, without having a beginning at all? And again, the question is, yes, just build a model. This is my favorite model. It's actually not even a model I think is right, once again. It's a model that I helped create, but it's about the search for models, not about saying that any one model is the right idea. We hope that someday we get there, but we don't claim that we're there yet. So whether or not the universe can be eternal does not come down to a conversation about abstract principles. It comes down to a conversation about building models and seeing which one provides the best account for what we see the universe to be doing. So I'd like to talk about the Bordet-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, since Dr. Craig emphasizes it. And the rough translation is that in some universes, not all, the space-time description that we have as a classical space-time breaks down at some point in the past. Where Dr. Craig says that the Bordet-Guth-Vilenkin theorem implies the universe had a beginning, that is false. That is not what it says. What it says is that our ability to describe the universe classically, that is to say, not including the effects of quantum mechanics, gives out.
Yeah, I think Craig made a big mistake focusing on the physics. I think he's not going to win on the physics with Sean Carroll. I mean, the guy's a giant in his field.
Yeah, and Craig thinks he can just, ontology his way out of anything. But no, he did make a big fuck up by bringing that up and I didn't even catch it because I was distracted by all the other nonsense Craig was doing. But
right.
Yeah, Carroll is absolutely right. The theorem does not say the universe had a beginning. It says there's a point at which our model breaks down. We have no fucking idea what's beyond that.
So it's more a beginning of our ability to understand it rather than a beginning of the existence of the universe. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah. It's to put it in a simple analogy. We can see a car moving down the road, and we can deduce back to a certain point where the car came from. But then we come to an intersection. We don't know if the car came from the left, from the right, or just came straight, or came out of someone's driveway. We have no freaking idea because our model of having observed the car breaks down at that point. There's too many uncertainties.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool.
That may be because there's a beginning, or it may be because the universe is eternal, either because the assumptions of the theorem are violated or because quantum mechanics becomes important. If you need...
But I remembered what I was going to say. I love how he William Lane Craig's so predictable that he's basically got a rebuttal as his introduction. Like he knew exactly what he was going to say because he's already, he's got slides and everything for it. It's fantastic.
To invoke a theorem, because that's what you like to do rather than building models, I would suggest the quantum eternity theorem. If you have a universe that obeys the conventional rules of quantum mechanics, has a non-zero energy, and the individual laws of physics are themselves not changing with time, that universe is necessarily eternal. The time parameter in Schrodinger's equation, telling you how the universe evolves, goes from minus infinity to infinity. Now, this might not be the definitive question, the definitive answer to the real world, because you can always violate the assumptions of the theorem, but because it takes quantum mechanics seriously, it's a much more likely starting point for analyzing the history of the universe. But again, I will keep reiterating what matters are the models, not the abstract principles. Now, Dr. Craig brings up an argument about the second law of thermodynamics, and I've written a whole book you can buy on Amazon right now from your iPhones about the second law and its relationship to cosmology. It is certainly a true question, a true issue that we don't know why the early universe had a low entropy and entropy has ever been increasing. That's a good challenge for cosmology. To imagine that cosmologists cannot answer that question without somehow invoking God is a classic God of the gaps move. I know that Dr. Craig says that's not what he's doing, but
nice. That is exactly what he's doing. No, you're right. You're right. I gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is a valid point because most of physics is symmetrical. You can run any formula forwards or backwards, except anything that has to do with entropy, because then the arrow of time matters. Those equations are non-reversible. We don't fully understand why that is, but that doesn't mean it's God.
Right. You have no right, and you can't even say it's more probable to be God. I think that even that is a God of the gaps fallacy. All you're doing is trying to smuggle in probability to something with a sample size of 1. I don't. And yeah, Kiwi Burb's right. God can fit into some pretty tiny gaps. He is a slim boy. Yes. 100%.
It's all those quantum effects. It's Jesus particles.
Jesus particles. Yeah. Jesus particles.
The early universe had a low entropy, but that is not an argument that we can't figure it out. There's more than one possibility. Maybe there is a principle, like Stephen Hawking would say, that puts the early universe in a low entropy state. Or maybe there is no high entropy state. In my model of an eternal universe, the reason why our universe is always changing is because the universe always can change. There is no equilibrium for it to fall into. Dr. Craig brings up a quote. He brings up various things that I think really muddle the cosmological picture here. He says that my model is not working very well because it violates unitarity, the conservation of information, and that is straightforwardly false. In my model, unitarity is the whole point. There's a quantum mechanical wave function that describes the evolution of the universe from one piece into multiple pieces, and that evolution is perfectly unitary. He quotes Stephen Hawking, backsliding in his statement about baby universes, but that was in the context of black holes. It had nothing to do with cosmology. That quote was taken completely out of context. Finally, he makes a big deal about Boltzmann brains. I'm going to talk about that.
That's a valid point. Hawking was hung up on black holes, as evidenced by the Hawking radiation theorem. But he also had a problem with it on that principle of information. If something falls into a black hole, for all intents and purposes, it no longer exists within the universe as described by our current models, the time space that we're familiar with. It may still exist, but it's no longer accessible. So from our frame of reference, that information has been destroyed. And Hawking bent his brain over backwards to try to find a workaround. He had this idea that anything that falls into a black hole leaves a holographic imprint of its quantum state on the event horizon. If only we can learn how to read it. He came up with all kinds of things, but he never satisfactorily solved the problem.
Right. But that doesn't, even though he never solved it, that doesn't mean that it's more likely to be a god. That just doesn't follow. A
little bit later. Most importantly, he talks about the fact that if the universe is eternal and you have a second law of thermodynamics, then there must have been a moment in the middle when the entropy was lowest. And he calls this a thermodynamic beginning and quotes another paper. That's fine, except it's equivocation on the word beginning. A thermodynamic beginning is not a beginning, it happens in the middle. It's a moment in the history of the universe from which the entropy is higher in one direction of time and the other direction of time. There is no room in such a conception for God to have brought the universe into existence at any one moment. If you really believe that the beginning of the universe is an important piece of evidence for God, an eternal universe with a low entropy state in the middle is not helping your case. What you should
Wow, he is just ripping him to shreds.
That is a fantastic point because it's exactly analogous to the abiogenesis function in the gap between dead Earth and organic evolution. We haven't solved abiogenesis. However, from what we understand about what had to have happened for the reality we observe to exist, there is no point in the entire process of chemical evolution for a god to reach down and go zap. There isn't a gap to put a god in there.
Yeah.
Same thing with the universe.
be doing is trying to build models, like I said. So the question is, are there realistic models of eternal cosmologies? Well, I spent half an hour on the internet. I was able to come up with about 17 different plausible working models of eternal cosmologies. I do not claim that any of these is the right answer. We're nowhere near the right answer yet. But you can come up with objections to every one of these models. You cannot say that they're not eternal. There's a theorem, Forte-Guth-Blanken, that has assumptions. So if you violate those assumptions, you can violate the theorem. Meanwhile, theism, I would argue, is not a serious cosmological model. That's because cosmology is a mature subject. We care about more things than just creating the universe.
A mature subject as opposed to a childish subject. A childish subject for children.
I mean, it is kind of a low blow, but it's also kind of fair. Because as we've discussed many, many times, theism gets hung up on the creation of the universe and the beginning of evolution and whether humans evolved from apes. It's very, very self-centered. It's a very childish in its me-firstedness, because it really is a myth. It's where did we come from? How do we have to live? What is our destiny? It's not really concerned with the nature of the universe, and that's why many theologies, including Craig's, put the earth at the spiritual center of reality. It doesn't matter if we're the physical center of the universe, but the whole universe was created just so life could occur on earth, because we are all that matter. Cosmology has grown up a bit.
Yes. But I just love you can kind of take it in a number of different ways. It's very good, very good.
Care about specific details. At the cosmology conferences, we're discussing these questions that you see before you. I'm not going to list all of them, but a real cosmological model wants to predict what is the amount of density perturbation in the universe and so forth. Theism does not even try to do this because ultimately theism is not well defined. So let's go to the second argument, the teleological argument from fine-tuning. I'm very happy to admit right off the bat, this is the best argument that the theists have when it comes to cosmology. That's because
I would agree. I would 100% agree. In fact, I think it's the best argument they have, period. It's not great. It's just the best they have. Like, it's not fantastic. But it is an argument that has some weight.
It's the turd sandwich with the least amount of turd on it.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. I mean,
I love my visuals.
Yeah, you and Beamsy both. Yeah.
That's it. I blame Beamsy. Beamsy's a bad influence on me.
Beamsy isn't even here at the moment, I don't think. So you can't blame poor Beamsy.
Phenomena, you have parameters of particle physics and cosmology, and then you have two different models, theism and naturalism. And you want to compare which model is the best fit for the data. I applaud that general approach. Given that, it is still a terrible argument. It is not at all convincing. I will give you 5 quick reasons why theism does not offer a solution to the purported fine-tuning problem. First, I am by no means convinced that there is a fine-tuning problem. And again, Dr. Craig offered no evidence for it. It is certainly true that if you change the parameters of nature, our local conditions that we observe around us would change by a lot. I grant that quickly. I do not grant that therefore life could not exist. I will start granting that once someone tells me the conditions under which life can exist. What is
right? And what kind of life? Like, what are we even talking about here? Is our carbon-based life form, organic life from Earth, is that the only life that can exist? We don't know. We have no idea. This is what I'm talking about with these probabilities based upon Bayesian analysis. You're saying, hey, this life is the only life that can exist. Life can't exist under these other conditions. There's so many assumptions. It just becomes meaningless.
Definition of life, for example. If it's just information processing, thinking, or something like that, there's a huge panoply of possibilities. They sound very science fiction-y, but then again, you're the one who's changing the parameters of the universe. The results are going to sound like they come from...
I love that. Yes, it sounds very science fiction-y, but you're doing science fiction. You're changing the parameters of the universe. That is science fiction. Like, yeah, that is so good.
Science fiction novel. Sadly, we just don't know whether life could exist if the conditions of our universe were very different because we only see the universe that we see. Secondly, God doesn't need to fine-tune anything. We talk about the parameters of physics and cosmology, the mass of the electron, the strength of gravity, and we say if they weren't the numbers that they were, then life itself could not exist. That really underestimates God by a lot, which is surprising from theists, I think. In theism, life is not purely physics.
This is a thing that some of our compatriots here in the atheosphere mention offhandedly from time to time, but he is nailing it right on the head. If there were a supernatural cause in the universe, then we would not necessarily expect life to make sense, for physics to operate the way it does. A supernatural force could violate physics if we found life where we did not expect to find it, in places where it couldn't survive. That would be evidence for God. The fact that our universe happens to exactly coincide with a naturalistic set of causes, that's not evidence for a God. That's what you'd expect to find if there were no God.
Yes.
And he nails it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
A collection of atoms doing things, like it is in naturalism. I would think that no matter what the atoms were doing, God could still create life. God doesn't care what the mass of the electron is. He can do what he wants. The only framework in which you can honestly say that the physical parameters of the universe must take on certain values in order for life to exist is naturalism. The third point is that the fine-tunings that you think are there might go away once you understand the universe better. They might only be apparent. There's a famous example that theists like to give, or even cosmologists who haven't thought about it enough, that the expansion rate of the early universe is tuned to within 1 part in 10 to the 60th. That's the naive estimate back of the envelope pencil and paper you would do. But in this case, you can do better. You can go into the equations of general relativity, and there is a correct, rigorous derivation of the probability. And when you ask the same question using the correct equations, you find that the probability is 1. All but a set of measure 0 of early universe cosmologies have the right expansion rate to live for.
Wow. The universe had a better design.
Yeah, like I said, in my rant earlier, I fucking hate the inflationary add-on to the Big Bang models. But all of the models require them, so the probability of it happening in any of the models is 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Long time and allow life to exist. I can't say that all parameters fit into that paradigm, but until we know the answer, we can't claim that they're definitely finely tuned. Number 4, there's an obvious and easy naturalistic explanation in the form of the cosmological multiverse. People like to worry about the multiverse. It sounds extravagant. I claim the multiverse is amazingly simple. It is not a theory. It is a prediction of physical theories that are themselves quite elegant, small, and self-contained that create universe after universes. There's no reason, no right that we have to expect that the whole entire universe looks like the conditions we have right now. But more importantly, if you take the multiverse as your starting point, you can make predictions. We live in an ensemble, and we should be able to predict the likelihoods that the conditions around us take different forms. So in cosmology papers dealing with the multiverse, you see graphs like this that try to predict the density of dark matter given other conditions in the multiverse. You do not see graphs like this in the theological papers trying to give God credit for explaining the fine-tuning, because theism is not well-defined. Now, Dr. Craig makes a lot about the Boltzmann brain problem, the problem that in the multiverse, we could just be random fluctuations rather than growing in the aftermath of a hot Big Bang. This is a significant misunderstanding of how the multiverse works. The multiverse doesn't say that everything that can possibly happen happens with equal probability. It says that there's a definite history of the multiverse and you can make predictions. Different multiverse models will have different ratios of ordinary observers to random observers. That's a good thing. That helps us distinguish between viable models of the multiverse and non-viable models. And there are plenty of viable models where the Boltzmann brain or random fluctuations do not dominate. Furthermore, just as a little preview of coming attractions, I'm trying to write a paper when I'm not debating about God and cosmology. I'm a physicist, and I'm currently working on a paper that says that actually Boltzmann brains random fluctuations occur much, much less frequently than we previously believed. It comes down to a better understanding of quantum fluctuations. You know, there's a caricature of theism that says theism is an excuse to stop thinking. You say that, oh, there's a problem, I don't need to solve it because God will solve it for me. That's clearly false, because many theists think very carefully and very rigorously about many problems. But sometimes there's an element of truth to it. This is an example. You're faced with a Boltzmann brain problem, go, I get out of that by saying that God created a single universe that might have stopped you from thinking about the physics in a deeper way and discovering interesting facts like this. Fifth and most important,
God might have created. Sorry, what did he say?
He said that some people get out of the Boltzmann brain problem by saying God only created one universe, so I don't have to think about that. It's very much like global warming might kill us all, but that's not my problem because God might end the world tomorrow, so I don't have to think about that.
No, well, I think they get out of the Boltzmann brain problem by saying that the God created a universe where I don't have to think about it, or the God Boltzmann brain problem doesn't exist.
You know, there's a caricature of theism that says theism is an excuse to stop thinking. You say that, oh, there's a problem, I don't need to solve it because God will solve it for me. That's clearly false, because many theists think very carefully and very rigorously about many problems. But sometimes there's an element of truth to it. This is an example. You're faced with a Boltzmann brain problem, go, I get out of that by saying that God created a single universe that might have stopped you from thinking about the physics in a deeper way and discovering interesting facts like this.
Yeah. God created a universe that might have stopped you from thinking about it and discovering the interesting Boltzmann brain problem. Like, that's okay.
Fifth, and most importantly, theism fails as an explanation. Even if you think the universe is finely tuned and you don't think that naturalism can solve it, theism certainly does not solve it. If you thought it did, if you played the game honestly, what you would say is, here is the universe that I expect to exist under theism. I will compare it to the data and see if it fits. What kind of universe would we expect? And I claim that over and over again, the universe we expect matches the predictions of naturalism, not theism. So the amount of tuning, if you thought that the physical parameters of our universe were tuned in order to allow life to exist, you would expect enough tuning, but not too much. Under naturalism, a physical mechanism could far over-tune by an incredibly large amount that has nothing to do with the existence of life, and that is exactly what we observe. For example, the entropy of the early universe is much, 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 much lower than it needs to be to allow for life. You would expect under theism that the particles and parameters.
That is an excellent point. And in fact, there's some apologists who actually make use of that. Hugh Ross, you know, my arch nemesis, he points out that we exist.
Wait, you have an arch nemesis?
Oh, yes, Hugh Ross, because he used to be an astrophysicist, hung it up to become an apologist, and now he's just lying out his ass about a whole bunch of things, and it really pisses me off.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a whole aside thing. He points out that In the early universe, we could not exist. The elements necessary for us to exist haven't been forged in the hearts of stars and the supernovas that are necessary to spread them around. None of that has happened. So we can't exist in the distant past.
Is anybody saying that we existed in the early universe?
It's part of his version of the fine-tuning argument. It's not just this universe, but it's this time in this universe. We couldn't exist in the early universe. We can't exist in the late universe because then all the energy is depleted. So we can only exist right now. Why did humans appear right now? Because this is when we could. Which is a bad argument for God for the same reason as Carroll just made. We exist in a period where we can exist, which does not demonstrate a supernatural power.
Right.
But Hugh Ross is saying that's the way God designed the universe.
It's kind of, it's almost like affirming the consequent. It's sort of saying, if there was a God, then we'd expect this to appear in a place that sort of, we can live and survive. We appear in a place we live and survive, therefore God put us there. Like, you're just taking the facts of the matter and sort of saying, and then just putting a post hoc rationalization in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. That's weird. I mean, that's just crazy, right?
I think I know why he does it. It's to try to get out in front of people who point out God didn't fine-tune the universe because, as Carroll said, we couldn't exist in the beginning. We can't exist later. So the universe itself isn't fine-tuned for life. There just happens to be this period when life doesn't immediately die.
Right. But I mean, as Sean Carroll pointed out, entropy could have been lower. It could have been a better universe, like a more stable universe, which is sort of why is God making shoddy universes? And if he's making it for us, then why make so much of it with all this stuff happening in it? That we, for most of our history, we have no idea it's even happening. Seems nonsensical to me.
Oh yeah, things happening in distant galaxies will never fucking affect us. So why are they even there?
God works in mysterious ways.
Indeed.
You're not supposed to question that. Oh, I just love that Sean's ripping him apart.
Particle physics would be enough to allow life to exist and have some structure that was designed for some reason. Whereas under naturalism, you'd expect them to be kind of random and a mess. Guess what? They are kind of random and a mess. You'd expect under theism life to play a special role in the universe. Under naturalism, you'd expect life to be very insignificant. I hope I don't need to tell you, life is very insignificant as far as the universe is concerned. Here's a photograph from the Hubble Space Telescope of a few hundred out of the hundreds of billions of galaxies in our observable universe. The theistic explanation for cosmological fine-tuning asks you to look at this picture and say, I know why it's like that. It's because I was going to be here, or we were going to be here. But there's nothing in our experience of the universe that justifies the kind of flattering story we like to tell about ourselves.
Is it just me, or does Craig look worried? Is that Craig worried?
Hard to say.
I don't know.
I think it may be his thoughtful face, but it may be his confused face as well. Like,
well, then maybe, yeah.
Like, he has enough of a grasp on things to make his own arguments. But
no, that's true.
Carroll is definitely talking way over his head, like ISS distance over his head.
Yeah, he should be going back to philosophy. This is not his wheelhouse, and I've sort of dabbled in it, and I think he's going to get stung. Well, he's already being stung for it. So, yeah.
In fact, I would argue that the failure of theism to explain the fine-tuning of the universe is paradigmatic. It helps understand the other ways in which theism fails to be a better theory than naturalism. What you should be doing over and over again is comparing the predictions or expectations under theism to under naturalism. You find that over and over again, naturalism wins. I'm going to zoom through these. It's not the individual arguments that are important, it's the accumulated effect. If theism were really true, there's no reason for God to be hard to find. He should be perfectly obvious, whereas in naturalism, you might expect people to believe in God, but the evidence to be thin on the ground. Under theism, you'd expect that religious beliefs should be universal. There's no reason for God to give special messages to this or that primitive tribe thousands of years ago. Why not give it to anyone? Whereas under naturalism, you'd expect different religious beliefs inconsistent with each other to grow up under different local conditions. Under theism, you'd expect religious doctrines to last a long time in a stable way. Under naturalism, you'd expect them to adapt to social conditions. Under theism, you'd expect the moral teachings of religion to be transcendent, progressive, sexism is wrong, slavery is wrong. Under naturalism, you'd expect that they reflect, once again, local mores, sometimes good rules, sometimes not so good. You'd expect the sacred texts under theism to give us interesting information. Tell us about the germ theory of disease. Tell us to wash our hands before we have dinner. Under naturalism, you'd expect the sacred text to be a mishmash, some really good parts, some poetic parts, and some boring parts and mythological parts. Under theism, you'd expect biological forms to be designed.
Yeah, and I have this argument sort of, if God is benevolent, why didn't he just include a recipe for soap in the Bible? Like, soap has probably saved more lives than any other invention put together, and God can't even be bothered to write. And it's such a simple recipe. It's like just fat and lye, and that's about it. You know, like, it is so simple. I don't understand why any. I mean, tell us about penicillin. Do you know how much like anguish it would have and how many lives you would save if you just put penicillin in the Bible? Like, hey, if you leave moldy bread and then apply it to wounds, it's going to, help kind of thing.
Yeah. Even an old wives' tale version would have been something.
Yeah.
Supernatural entity with all knowledge, but can't give us anything useful about the future. No advance warning. It's just antibiotics have saved my life multiple times. If I were born 100 years sooner, I'd be dead already.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these things, like, and so I like to ask sort of what knowledge about our reality, about the world, about the universe has the holy books actually given us? Like, what have we been able to implement? How have we been able to implement it into any kind of technology? Nothing. They have literally given us nothing. They've given us maybe a set of rules, but over the last few thousand years, it's given us literally nothing. I can't stress this enough. If you're looking merely in a practical way over which is better, science or religion, science has given us every single benefit that we have to date, and religion has given us nothing.
Yeah, even the vaunted moral codes aren't anything special compared to what the other cultures of the time already had.
Yeah, there's maybe a couple of things in there which may be kind of novel if you sort of look at them in a certain way, but not especially so. Most of the good things in there had been in other systems for ages, most notably the Egyptians and sort of earlier Mesopotamian cultures. So, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Under naturalism, they would derive from the twists and turns of evolutionary history. Under theism, minds should be independent of bodies. Under naturalism, your personality should change if you're injured, tired, or you haven't had your cup of coffee yet. Under theism, you'd expect that maybe you can explain the problem of evil. God wants us to have free will, but there shouldn't be random suffering in the universe. Life should be essentially just. And at the end of the day, in theism, you basically expect the universe to be perfect. Under naturalism, it should be kind of a mess. This is very strong empirical evidence. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but I can explain all of that. I know you can explain all. So can I. It's not hard to come up with ex post facto justifications for why God would have done it that way. Why is it not hard? Because theism is not well defined. That's what computer scientists call a bug, not a feature.
Yeah, because all of this you can just say, well, God desired it to be that way. Well, that's a bit of a crutch. Like, if you have a perfect being designing something, why is it so bad? Why is the design so terrible? And we see a lot of that in biology, right? Why is the design so terrible? Why does the recurrent laryngeal nerve take a detour? Why do we get infections in place? No, it's terrible. And you can always say, hey, God desired it to be that way. Why? Like, why? I don't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as he said, theism has to be terribly defined so that it has the adaptability to answer these kinds of questions by not answering these questions. But if it's true that, as people like Craig claim, God reveals himself by touching the spirit of the person or whatever the fuck, surely you can define your damn God.
Yeah.
Immanuel Kant famously said, there will never be an Isaac Newton for a blade of grass. In other words, sure, you can find some physical explanation for the motion of the planets, but never for something as exquisitely organized and complex as a biological organism. Except, of course, that Charles Darwin then went and did exactly that. We can paraphrase Dr. Craig's message of saying, there will never be an Isaac Newton for the cosmos. But everything we know about the history of science and the current state of physics says we should be much more optimistic than that. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this has got rebuttals or whatever. It's been a couple hours. Do you want to keep going?
Oh, yeah, we can go for a bit.
Okay, sure.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carroll, for that vigorous interaction. In my opening speech, I argued that God's existence is significantly more probable given the evidence of contemporary cosmology than it would have been without it. And this is due to the support which cosmology lends to key premises in the cosmological and teleological arguments. Now, before we review those arguments, let me just say a word about Professor Carroll's concluding remarks, which I believe are extraneous to tonight's discussion. He's very concerned to show that God's existence is improbable relative to certain non-cosmological data. For example, the problem of evil, our insignificant size, and so forth. The very fact that these are non-cosmological data shows that they are not relevant in tonight's debate. And I've addressed things like the problem of evil extensively, for example, in Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview. So the debate tonight is not over the probability of theism versus naturalism. That would requires to assess all sorts of non-cosmological data. Rather, the question is God's existence more probable given the date of cosmology, contemporary cosmology, than it would have been without it? And I think it certainly is. Let's look at those two arguments that I defended. Slide 31, please. Consider first the evidence for the beginning of the universe from the expansion of the universe and thermodynamics. Now, to my surprise, Dr. Carroll challenges the first premise of this argument by saying it's based on outmoded Aristotelian concepts of causality. I protest, not at all. There is no analysis given of what it means to be a cause in this first premise. You can adopt your favorite theory of causation or take causation to be a conceptual primitive. All it requires is that the universe didn't pop into being uncaused out of absolutely nothing. And if that's the price of non-theism, then I think the non-theist is welcome to it. Dr. Carroll says, but on the Hartle-Hawking model, the universe is uncaused. Not at all. Such a model comes into being, or rather the universe comes into being on such a model, and there's nothing in the theory that would explain why that universe exists rather than not. The model may be self-contained, but that's perfectly consistent with my arguments. I'm not arguing for some kind of interventionist deity, but rather why does the universe exist? Why did it come into being at all?
Well, just because we don't know why doesn't give you a license to say, hey, it's any more probable that it's a god than it's a magic rock. This is the thing, like, yeah, Sean Carroll's right. You're doing God of the gaps.
Yeah, it's fun how he takes all these legitimate arguments, undermining the credibility of theism, and then just sweeps them aside and says, well, these aren't cosmology. We're not discussing those tonight. He's kind of right in a purely formalistic sense, but at the same time, he's also basically conceding that if he has to face these arguments, he loses, period, no question.
Yeah.
So that's an oof. But I don't know. I'm trying to remember something from a long time ago. It was something my high school physics teacher demonstrated, which was if you have a model where the universe might have always existed or might never exist. I can't remember how he demonstrated it, but he showed through a physical demonstration that in such a situation where it's always existed or never existed, it will always have always existed. And it may have something to do with the impossibility of non-existence. It's like proving a negative squared, squaring a negative number, in fact, because you cannot ever square a negative number and get a negative number.
Right.
Now, with respect to the second premise, Dr. Carroll says there are all kinds of beginningless models of the universe. Well, it's certainly true that such models exist, but the problem is none of them is successful. Slide 32, please. As Jim Sinclair has shown in our article.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, Billy, but your God model isn't even successful in the slightest. It's a non-starter. This is the thing. At least it's what Sean Carroll's saying. At least the models explain things. You don't get to say, "Hey, a God done it." Well, why is this principle the same? How does this work? Was the process? And you say, well, it's God. I don't have to explain it. That's not a model. That's an excuse. I'm sorry. It's an excuse.
The Blackwell Companion, all of the models that Dr. Carroll has mentioned have been shown to be either untenable or not to avert the beginning of the universe. Alex Valenkin says flatly, there are no models at this time that give a satisfactory model for a universe without a beginning. Consider in particular Dr. Carroll's own model. Slide 34, please. This model
was wrong.
No, that's the right one, Carroll Chen.
No, I mean the slide he showed earlier with the various models and the criteria that required a beginning. I didn't get all the way through it, but on the third one, cyclic models, the condition that requires a beginning is a second law of thermodynamics. That's not true. In a cyclic model, entropy resets every time the cycle resets.
Yeah. And in a cyclic, it is a closed model.
Asymptomatically static model. No, I don't like it.
Yeah. I think he's making some assumptions there, which may not accurately be, reflect the model.
Yeah, like just look at number one, expanding models, singularity theorems. One, like Carroll pointed out, we don't necessarily have to posit a singularity because we just have a point beyond which our model breaks down. We could theoretically, and by which I mean hypothetically, for those of you who may be sticklers out there, posit that it just expands forever, that warps our brains because how could that possibly be? Eventually, if you go backwards in time, it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You end up with a Zeno's paradox. At some point it disappears, but that's not necessarily true. Just because we
Right.
can't measure below the Planck distance doesn't mean there's nothing
Right.
there.
And the problem with Zeno's paradox is that it doesn't describe things in the real world. Like if you sort of, I think, isn't Zeno's the one where you can never get to somewhere because the amount of distance you have to travel is halved and halved and halved and halved kind of thing?
It works
Is that
both
the one I'm
ways.
thinking
Yes,
of?
that's one of them.
Right.
The other version is, a runner can never start his race if you keep pushing
Right.
him back half a step.
Right. And so I think Achilles and the turtle is the one that comes to mind when someone mentions it, that Achilles fires his bow and the arrow travels, but the turtle travels, and so the arrow travels and the turtle travels, so that the arrow will never reach the turtle. The problem is that here in the real world, we're having turtle soup for dinner. That's the problem. Like when you actually apply it to real world things, Zeno's paradox it's not a paradox.
Yeah, in fact, I'd say that it creates an unnamed meta paradox, I suppose, because it poses. There's a few different paradoxes in the dim, misty reaches of philosophy. There's whole YouTube channels dedicated to all these assorted paradoxes.
Right,
and
right.
the problem is that while they're unbreakable as a mental construct, when applied to reality, they never work. Like in Zeno's paradox, we cross rooms all the damn time, even though philosophically we shouldn't be able to. So it shows that there's a certain level of absurdity even within philosophy, where while all the properties and premises and arguments and shit are all airtight, they're not real.
Yeah. Or wrong in some way that our brains can't wrap our head around. We're missing some details.
Model for a universe without a beginning. Consider in particular Dr. Carroll's own model. Slide 34, please. This model presupposes, the next slide, yes, it presupposes a reductionistic view of time according to which the direction of time is defined in terms of entropy increase. Now, in the model, notice that there are two arrows of time for the mother universe pointing in opposite directions. So on this view of time, we don't really have an eternally existing mother universe here at all. Rather, you have two universes which share a common origin in the central surface. So what the model actually implies, rather than avoids, is...
No.
Well, what's the problem with that?
I mean, yeah. For one, you could have two universes. In fact, many people have made this a model for our universe. That if you just, for simplicity, assume a singularity, our universe blasts forward. Again, we don't have any particular reason to see the arrow of time's direction as necessary. It appears to be arbitrary, or possibly a roll of the dice. So at the moment of the singularity's expansion, you could wind up with two universes, one with the arrow of time going this way, and one with the arrow of time going the other way. They're both moving away from the expansion event, so they will never connect. And that has the added benefit of explaining the asymmetry, because if this universe with its direction of time slightly favors what we call normal matter, and the other one slightly favors antimatter, now you have a net zero effective universe, and there's no symmetry problem.
Oh, someone mentioned
a fun
your
explanation.
nemesis in the chat.
Let me see here. Hugh Ross, yes. He suggests that... Damn thing's jumping around on me. that this first creation of the fallen age was intentionally created with entropy to set an upper limit, and that the next creation, because that's this Earth will be destroyed and the next one will be perfect and such. This universe is designed to fall apart. Also, it seems you have a new member.
Oh, Kiwi Burb, thank you so much. But yeah, Crimson Out, you can't sort of say that without demonstrating that this is actually a creation, which you haven't done. I mean, it's interesting that he suggests it, but like as Ember said, he isn't really taken seriously in sort of cosmological circles, because sort of just saying God done it is not a good explanation and has no explanatory power whatsoever. So sure, prove that it's creation first. Go for it.
Yeah, Kiwi, please do enjoy some custom emojis while you're here. These are fun.
Thank you so much, Kiwi. But I gotta note down to myself to update my thing. I'm so bad on that. I do apologize, everybody that ever helps me. I am so bad at updating my stuff. It's ridiculous. But that's okay. I will get on that, Kiwi Burb, and put your name in the list of people that I love and that support me, and I so appreciate it. I really do. So a big shout out to the Burb, and that face is just horrendous. I love it so much. Is that the
troll face with
that's the troll face? On? Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing.
That is a troll Kiwi right there. So I don't know if I should be happy or sad they're a member, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Yes, I think that was Hugh Ross that said that aliens are demons. Yes, that's correct.
He has a lot of fun ideas. He's been on MTV a couple of times making some interesting statements. Mm-hmm.
Really?
They're older debates, like 4 years ago or more. But yeah, he's been through.
Yeah, I'd love to get back on MDD. Actually, that would be fantastic. I've got to talk to Ryan, but
I know it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah.
A beginning of time and of the universe. Time has a beginning on this model, and therefore it involves all of the problems that are pertinent to the universe coming into being. Be that as it may, I think it's safe to say that there is no credible classical model of a beginningless universe today. Slide 35, please. Now, Dr. Carroll does hold out hope that quantum cosmology might serve to restore the past eternality of the universe. But I would say not only is there no evidence for such a hope, but I would agree with Valenkin that if there is a quantum gravity...
There is no evidence for such a hope.
I mean, thanks for that admission, because he just invalidated his earlier presentation about the phase 1 universe leading into our phase 2 universe. But that's neither here nor there. Carroll isn't making that argument. He's pigeonholing. He's saying this is what Carroll said, but straw man. That's what I want. He's making a straw man out of what Carroll said, so he can knock it down or set it on fire.
Unruly weasel in the chat.
Regime prior to the Planck time, then that just is the beginning of the universe. And Dr. Carroll says, well, you can have quantum descriptions of the universe that are eternal, and that's certainly true. But the question is, why would the universe transition to classical spacetime just 13 billion years ago? It could not have existed from infinity past.
Why? We don't know. But he also said that sort of these events can happen. Because it's just, why did God do it? You don't know, do you? You don't know. You're just wildly speculating.
Yeah, applying a why at that point. Bill, why are you 70 years old or whatever it is? Because you were born 70 years ago. There's no law of the universe. Bill Craig must be born on this day. No, that's when it happened. You don't need a why behind that, because there's no mind causing it to happen. Well, in Bill's case, there may have been a mind. His mother may have forgotten to take a birth control or something. A decision was made.
In an unstable quantum state, and then just 13 billion years ago, transition to classical spacetime. It would have done it from eternity past, if at all. So I think we've got good evidence from the expansion of the universe that the universe probably began to exist. What about the evidence from thermodynamics? First is the problem of information loss to baby universes on his theory. And you'll recall that's why Stephen Hawking rejected the baby universe hypothesis. Now, Dr. Carroll responds, well, my mechanisms for generating the baby universes don't use Hawking's mechanisms. All right, but are they any more successful? I don't think so. According to Chris Weaver in his article on the Carroll-Chen model, he says the Fari-Guth and Guven nucleation that Dr. Carroll uses out of a considered spacetime is merely speculative, and Carroll's discussion should be thought of as exploratory. It is therefore safe to conclude that a central piece of the model is missing, and so the Carroll-Chen model is incomplete in that it does not have a clear recommended dynamical path from the background spacetime to the birth of universes like ours. In fact, Weaver goes on to point out
he's mad that Carroll's model is incomplete. Where's your model, Craig? Do you have? Because that's what science does. That's what science actually does. Is show me your model. If it does a better job of explaining the universe and makes predictions that supersedes the previous model, then you win. You can't just say your model isn't perfect, so we have nothing.
God.
Holy book, hooray,
and God. Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious of a person with no fucking model of accusing the other guy of having an imperfect model.
Do you think Carroll's going to pick up on that? I think he will. I think, and like I've said it in the past, I'll say it again, creationists are immune to irony. Like any normal person would go, hey, the irony of that is astounding. Like your model is unformed. Your model is just basically God done it. That's your entire model.
Universe described by the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem like ours, these Fari-Guth-Guven mechanisms cannot produce such a universe, and therefore these mechanisms fail. I also secondly pointed out that there's a Boltzmann brain problem with respect to Dr. Carroll's model. And it seems to me that he just didn't respond to the point that I was making, namely, since every baby universe grows into a de Sitter space, there will be vastly, vastly more of these Boltzmann brains in the long run than there will be ordinary observers. And so what Dr. Carroll would need to do is to justify some non-standard measure of probability that would make ordinary observers more probable than Boltzmann brains. But he admits that he cannot do it. We also then saw that the quantum gravity will not avert this conclusion because of the Wall theorem, which should be valid for the quantum gravity era and requires the beginning of the universe. So it seems to me we've got good evidence from the expansion of the universe and from thermodynamics that the universe is probably not past eternal that began to exist. Now, what about that second argument based upon the fine-tuning of the universe? Here, Dr. Carroll expresses skepticism that the fine-tuning is real. But a good many, if not most of his colleagues, would simply disagree with him here. Slide 37. Luke Barnes provides a list of just some of the scientists who have published works in defense of the reality of fine-tuning. And
Penrose is in there.
Guth. Hawking.
Vilenkin.
Hawking.
Uh-huh.
I think Craig is going to get called out hard on this one.
Yeah.
Dawkins, the biologist. Did Craig just write down the name of every scientist he could think of?
Well, I think maybe they have acknowledged the appearance of fine tuning. They may not have acknowledged fine tuning itself. I don't know if Dawkins. I don't know if that's true.
Sandage, Alan Sandage. Yeah, no. No. Bad Craig.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. Penrose is unconvinced by William Lane Craig's suggestion that what is wrongly described as fine-tuning cannot be assumed to be a single. Like he does. No, bad, Craig. What are you doing?
This is the Mary Schweitzer claim of the philosopheists.
Maybe. I mean, I think they would have all acknowledged the appearance of fine-tuning, that it looks like, that intuitively it looks like things have been tuned for this life. But I don't think many of them would actually say, hey, it is fine-tuned. I think that is not cool.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of one more name that we should add to the list.
So in this case, it is an argument to authority, and he's also doing that word smuggling thing again. Scientists who have defended the reality of fine-tuning. Yeah. He's this motherfucker.
You absolute clown.
Namely, Sean Carroll. Listen to what he has to say about the low entropy condition of the early universe, which Robin Collins calls potentially the most outstanding case of fine-tuning. Carroll writes, if the universe we see is really all there is, with the Big Bang as a low entropy beginning, we seem to be stuck with an uncomfortable fine-tuning problem. And so
there's a lot of ifs in there, buddy.
And also, I would love Craig to define entropy. Like we're assuming that he's using entropy in the physics sense, but even then there's room for wiggles. But that may not be the case. I don't know if Carroll's ever going to bother, but it would be fun to be like, Craig, what do you think fine-tuning means? Could you explain how you're using that word? Because I will bet a nickel, no matter how he defines it, you could knock it down. Do you mean high energy density? Do you mean high quality energy? Do you mean random events happening? Because if we're getting into the random events, oh boy, do I have news for you about the early universe. There was a lot of random shit happening.
Yep. Nice.
tries to explain away this fine-tuning via the world ensemble or multiverse hypothesis. But then, as I argued in my opening speech, he confronts this Boltzmann brain problem once again. Even if Dr. Carroll could show that ordinary observers predominate in life-permitting worlds, what about all of those worlds that are not life-permitting? Because the other constants and quantities are not finely tuned. In such worlds, which vastly outnumber finely tuned worlds, there will be no ordinary observers. And yet there will be untold numbers of Boltzmann brains dominated or produced by thermal fluctuation. So the entire multiverse will be
You can't just assume that in any universe where the fine-tuning, where the results of the constants lottery don't permit life, there will be a Boltzmann brain? No.
Yeah.
No, it's not guaranteed.
Great stretch.
In fact,
absolutely.
Again, it's an argument. It's supposed to be absurd, because if you work it out, you have a disembodied brain that comes into existence with past memories, that it only works as a philosophical idea. It is not physically possible. It is not logically coherent. Because how does the brain survive if there's no body attached to it? How do the memories get encoded by magic? Like, that's not how anything works. It's not a viable possibility because it doesn't make sense. It's an incoherent idea, which is the point.
Having vastly more Boltzmann brains than ordinary observers like us. And therefore the data on the multiverse hypothesis is incomprehensibly improbable. The evidence is strongly disconfirmatory of the world ensemble hypothesis. Now, Dr. Carroll says that theism does no better, though, in this regard in accounting for the low entropy condition of the universe. For why, he asks, did God make the entropy of the universe so unnecessarily low in order to create us? Well, I have two responses to this. First, it is no part of the fine-tuning argument to assert that the purpose for which the universe was created is us. There may well be intelligent life created by God scattered throughout the universe.
Really? Really? You're saying that we're going to meet aliens with Bibles and their own Jesus? I don't... Are they sinners that need redemption? I want to hear more about these alien Christians out there. I really do. Like
that raises some interesting thoughts. Like, you know, the Mormons have this idea that the universe is full of alien worlds where everybody's heard of Jesus, and it's dead Mormons who are gods over those worlds. Yes. And there's also a few books I've read. One of my favorite series is Black Ocean. It was when Firefly went off the air, the author was sad, so he said, I'm going to write some more space cowboy adventure, but I am adding wizards by gum. And in his world building, it turns out humans found two friendly alien races to ally with, and both of them had already heard of Jesus. Turns out the monkey people only got 6 commandments because they're more logical than we are, and the turtle people only got 1 commandment, which was basically don't be a dick. So the turtle people are like the best people. But it just kind of like, all the religions just kind of collapsed together into one church, because once extraterrestrials had heard of the same God that we had, all the other human religions just went away. And I'm like, that's fascinating.
Weird. And Tapioca Weasel was doing his tapioca thing and giving out memberships. Thank you so much, Dr. Tapioca Weasel. I don't think I can highlight anything. Yeah, that one can't be highlighted, but it's highlighted in my heart. There you go. It's highlighted in my heart. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my favorite weasel. And yeah, I'd be happy to. When you said, like Tapioca said, "Oh, do you want to do a flat Earth debate with me?" And I'm like, "I'll take you on, you flat earther." And I read it as like, "Do you want to debate flat Earth against me?" Is how I read it. I don't know why. And then he's like, "No, I want it to be on your team." It's like, yeah, that makes more sense actually. Now that
It does, yes. Honestly, I wouldn't want to go against you, Mark.
Well, look, it was a continuation. Dr. Weasel was talking about handing his degree earlier and giving up physics as a lie. Okay, so I thought it was just a continuation of the joke. I'm sorry. I never get the joke. God,
that's okay. Same problem.
Yeah.
But secondly, as Robin Collins has pointed out, even if a general low entropy condition is not necessary for our existence, it is necessary for the discoverability of the universe. God hasn't given us an instruction manual about how the world works, but what he has done is make a world which is susceptible to rational exploration, and discovery. And if God wanted to make a universe discoverable by embodied conscious agents, he might well make it in such a low entropy condition.
Okay, so the whole point is he's basically affirming the consequent again. If there's a God, then he'll make the world in a way that's discoverable and logical through naturalism. The world is discoverable and logical through naturalism, therefore God.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's great.
Affirming the consequent.
But
yeah.
if there was a God who cared about people worshiping him, he would make himself discoverable and logical. And yet...
Yep. Champion hide and seek.
Hear more about that tomorrow when Robin gives his paper. So, in summary, it seems to me that Dr. Carroll faces uniquely a Boltzmann brain problem for a number of reasons, a problem that does not afflict theism. So, in summary, this is not a debate between naturalism and theism. Otherwise, I would be offering ontological arguments, moral arguments, other sorts of arguments. For that debate, you need to listen to my debate with Dr. Rosenberg last year at Purdue University. What this debate is about is, to what degree does the data of contemporary cosmology render God's existence more probable than if we didn't have that data? And to my mind, it's almost undeniable that God's existence is much more probable given the evidence that we have for the beginning of the universe and the fine-tuning of the universe, and therefore contemporary cosmology is strongly confirmatory of theism.
Strongly
saying
confirmatory.
That, but he has yet to demonstrate that.
Yes, I think you keep saying that word. I don't think you know what that word means. Like
that word, it does not mean what you think it means.
Yeah, it does not mean what you think it means. Yeah, I love Princess Bride. Always fantastic. Look, strongly confirmatory. Just saying, hey, I think it's more probable that this happened. When all of your probabilities are based upon other probabilities, like your assumptions and probabilities that those are assumptions and true, and probabilities that those, is not strong confirmatory evidence. That is not evidence at all, really. That's just an argument from incredulity that you don't think that naturalism could have caused it. That's it.
Yeah, he's just trying to scale back the debate to his victory condition. Well, I mean, he's low bar Bill for a reason, right? His victory condition is a bar that's barely off the ground, and he's still tripping over it. But you know, Carroll's over here like just building castles out of data, and Craig's like, but none of that matters because all I have to do is step over this bar, and then he still trips on it.
Yeah, and he's still doing God of the Gaps. He's basically saying, hey, if I can show that your models aren't accurate, then it raises the possibility for my God. But it doesn't, because you have infinite other explanations than your God. Magic and unicorns and, you know, extra-dimensional aliens and all these different explanations. And so if you have infinite other explanations, eliminating a few does not raise the probability of your own. You've got to raise the probability of your own by giving evidence for it, not against anything else.
Great. Well, thanks again. And I think that we can just go right back to my 3 major points. And I think that halfway through our forum, I believe these 3 major points more strongly than ever. Now, I know that Dr. Craig would disagree, but I'll try to establish that his disagreements with number 1 are based on misunderstandings of the science. His disagreements with number 2, the evidence against theism, is largely based on using number 3, the fact that theism is not well defined. So let's go to the cosmological argument. There's a deep philosophical difference between us. I claim that a consistent, complete model that fits the data, accounts for what we see in the world, is a success. There's no right that we have to demand more than that. And I believe that Dr. Craig's response was, yes, there is. I don't think this counts as a very good response. It's a very difficult thing because the universe is different than our everyday experience. That doesn't sound like a surprising statement, but we really need to take it to heart. To look at a modern cosmological model and say, yes, but what was the cause? It's like looking at someone taking pictures with an iPhone and saying, but where does the film go? It's not that the answer is difficult or inscrutable. It's completely the wrong question to be asking. And in fact, it's a little technical. Most of this.
I love that. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
my
a
goodness.
good analogy too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to steal that because you may have heard there was an incident at Amy's last open mic after the Kent debate. They did the after show on Atheist Junior's channel and then did Midnight Ranting on Amy's channel. And our good friend Sunflower came in and kept posing questions exactly like that, like a room full of evolutionary minded people, and he kept basically holding up a cell phone and saying, where does the film go? And if I had this analogy, I could have headed off so much nonsense.
Well, I'll look it up. I was just, like I said, I've been sick over the last week, so I was feeling a bit under the weather. I just, I think I was sleeping during the time. I felt pretty off. So, I could certainly watch it. I thought Sunflower really turned a corner once he'd come on my channel and we had that long talk.
He had. I thought he had anyway, because the last time we spoke, we came to a consensus in like 20 minutes. That was great, which is one of the things that threw me off, because he was confrontational. He was throwing red herrings left and right. Unfortunately, a couple of them caught my attention, and he was like interrupting. And when we finally drilled down to the point where he was like, well, his gotcha question was, what controls fetal development in the single-celled zygote? What causes it to start to do what it does and differentiate in the way it does? And I said, that's way outside my wheelhouse. I don't know. And he goes, aha, your model is junk. It falls apart completely. And I'm like, hold on, just because I don't personally know. Yeah. I'm like, for fuck's sake, my dude, no one person can know every answer to everything. Right. I'm not going to just start making shit up. That's not how we roll here. It's probably
sort of genetic information and the way that
I'm sure it's like proteins doing protein things, hormones activating certain switches, but I don't know,
Yeah. Wow. That's, but to say, hey, you don't know. Yeah, but there's scientists that really well understand the process of what causes a fetus to grow in the way that it does. I don't. Okay.
And then Beamsy chased him off by citing articles. It was actually kind of hilarious. Beamsy was just like quietly dropping reference after reference after reference in the chat, and then Sunflower, of course, didn't notice. And then Beamsy pointed out that he was doing it. He's like, I'm just over here quietly dropping references every time you bring up a question. And Sunflower opened one, read the title of it, and then claimed it triggered him. Oh no, the title of an article. And took it was just an absolute fucking disgrace. So I took inspiration from you, actually, Mark. I decided to make that into a Room Rumble style thing. So that'll be coming out on Wednesday, I think.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of having a reverse Room Rumble where everybody comes in and hassles me for a change. So I think that would be cool.
Dr. T, here's your chance to get started on that flat Earth aggression.
Yeah. Frigging weasel. Come at me, bro. I'm a bro lever now. I love that term, the bro lever. It's just a great term. And, well, bro, you can't bro, and it's just like, it's a bro lever. Great. Yeah, exactly, Kiwi. One atheist can't answer a question equals God exists. Absolutely. That's not fallacious in the slightest.
Yep. My thing has an explanation for everything. You can't explain, but my magic book does. Okay.
Yeah.
my second talk here, but I think it's worth getting it right. Why should we expect that there are causes or explanations or reason why in the universe in which we live? It's because the physical world inside of which we're embedded has two important features. There are unbreakable patterns, laws of physics. Things don't just happen, they obey the laws. And there's an arrow of time stretching from the past to the future. The entropy was lower in the past, increases toward the future. Therefore, when you find some event or state of affairs B today, we can very often trace it back in time, just one or a couple of possible predecessor events that we therefore call the cause of that, which leads to be according to the laws of physics. But crucially, both of these features of the universe that allow us to speak the language of causes and effects are completely absent when we talk about the universe as a whole. We don't think that our universe is part of a bigger ensemble that obeys laws. Even if it's part of the multiverse is not part of a bigger ensemble that obeys laws. Therefore, nothing gives us the right to demand some kind of external cause. The idea that our intuitions about cause and effect that we get from the everyday experience of the world in this room should somehow be extended without modification to the fundamental nature of reality is fairly absurd. On a more specific level, we talked about my model. Again, I'm not trying to defend my model. I'm the first one to say that it has problems. None of the problems that it has are the ones that Dr. Craig raised. He says that it's not really eternal, which it is hard to express the extent to which I think this is grasping at straws. The axis for time goes to the top and the bottom, and it goes forever. The only sense in which this universe is not eternal is that there is a moment in the middle where the entropy is lowest. I made the point in my opening speech that has nothing to do with the kind of beginning you would need to give God room to work, and as far as I can recall, Dr. Craig didn't address that argument. He does say that it is speculative, the idea of baby universes coming into existence. The first to agree, it's completely speculative. He quotes a paper that says that the mechanism by which baby universes are created is speculative and might not be right. Again, it's completely true. He claims to use it to say that unitarity is violated, even though the quote he read didn't mention unitarity and wasn't about unitarity. That is not a sensible objection. I will repeat, the quantum eternity theorem, a sensible place for beginning object analysis of the history of the universe, might be with the rules of quantum mechanics. He claims that someone else said that there might be a singularity in quantum gravity, but he gives us no understanding. He simply repeats his previous analysis. So I want to draw attention not to my model, but to the model of Anthony Geary and Stephen Grattan, because this
Yeah, so he's absolutely crushing William Lane Craig on the cosmology, unsurprisingly, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. Not much to add at this point. It's enjoyable as hell.
Yeah.
Fine. This is a bouncing cosmology that is infinite in time. It goes from minus infinity to infinity. It has classical description everywhere. There's no possible sense in which this universe comes into existence at some moment in time. And I would really like Dr. Craig to explain to us why this universe is not okay. Now, you might think that, there's a theorem by Alan Guth and Arvin Bourdet and Alex Lankin that says the universe had a beginning. I've explained to you why that's not true, but in case you don't trust me, I happen to have Alan Guth right here, one of the authors of the Bourdet-Guth-Lankin theorem. Alan, what do you say? He says, I don't know whether the universe had a beginning. I suspect the universe didn't have a beginning. It's very likely eternal, but nobody knows. Now, how in the world can the author of the Bourdet-Guth-Lankin theorem say the universe is probably eternal for the reasons I've already told you? The theorem is only about classical descriptions of the universe, not about the universe itself. So going to the teleological argument, it is true, Dr. Craig brings up the point that people disagree with me. It is true. I attempted to give you an argument, not merely an opinion poll. If we're allowed to take opinion polls, I will poll my fellow cosmologists on whether God had anything to do with creating the universe.
Oh dear. Did you hear that?
Taking an opinion poll?
Yeah. If we're doing an opinion poll on what physicist thinks, he'll poll his colleagues on whether God was involved in creating the universe. That is brilliant. I love it. Look at that cheeky smile.
That is a great Uno reverse.
Yes, if William Lane Craig says that, hey, all these physicists acknowledge fine-tuning is a problem, then we should also ask them, was God involved? Why aren't we doing that? Why are we only asking them whether the thing you support? Like, that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And I will win by a landslide. I suspect that Dr. Craig thinks the majority opinion of cosmologists is important for some issues, but not for others. The entropy of the early universe is exactly backwards when it comes to being an argument for fine-tuning according to theology. Dr. Craig quotes me in a gotcha moment. He quotes me saying, look, the early universe is finely tuned with a low entropy. That is absolutely true. The point that I raised was not that there is not fine-tuning. It's that there's no evidence that fine-tuning is for life to exist. Indeed, the maximum possible entropy of the part of the universe we observe is this huge number, 10 to the 122. The entropy that you would need is a little bit lower than that if you wanted life to exist. But it's almost the same. It's 0.999, etc., times the maximum entropy. Whereas the actual entropy of the early universe is enormously smaller than that. There's absolutely no reason why the universe would look like this if the fine-tunings were put there in order for life to exist. I'm not saying there's not fine-tunings, I'm saying they're not there for life. Turning to the multiverse.
Interesting. Was William Craig mentioning fine-tuning for life?
I don't know if he ever expressly said that. Like he's been saying that the universe is fine-tuned, but it seems to kind of be like a default unspoken thing that it's for life because here we have life. But I don't know if he ever expressly said that.
No, I don't think so either. He seems to sort of be, I think William Lane Craig is talking about the formation of the universe rather than it fine-tuning for life. Mind you, he sort of, so his many words, he was mentioning Boltzmann brains, which is sort of, does suggest it's fine-tuning for consciousness. I don't know. That's a bit vague. He didn't really say what it was fine-tuning for, did he?
Actually, let's play an Uno reverse on Craig on this one. If, as he asserts, every universe where life and intelligent observers isn't possible eventually causes Boltzmann brains to arise, who are intelligent, then intelligence arises in 100% of universes. If we grant Craig his argument, he loses. It's literally a self-defeating argument.
Yeah. No, I see that. And the fact that we're not a Boltzmann brain, that's not an indicator. I mean, but if you expect intelligence to arise, well, we're intelligence.
Again, it is a completely speculative thing, but it is a completely natural thing, and I don't really see any argument against that. The multiverse, the idea that outside the universe we see, there could be very different regions with very different physical parameters, is no more radical than the idea there are different planets with different atmospheres. To a frog on a lily pad, that lily pad is its universe. To us in the universe we see, 100 billion galaxies is enough, but it's very, very easy to come up with physical models that have much more out there. The main argument Dr. Craig has against this is the Boltzmann brain argument. Again, I gave you why that's not a good argument, and it seems to have been ignored in Dr. Craig's last speech, namely that the multiverse does not predict that everything happens. It predicts certain things happen with certain frequencies. So what you do as a working cosmologist is check that your universe is not dominated by Boltzmann brains. Are there multiverse models that pass that test? Yes, there are. It is easily avoided. Then he brings up this weird argument. He says there could be the regions where ordinary observers could not exist because the parameters are not right, but Boltzmann brains could exist. But the whole point is that Boltzmann brains are forms of life. Boltzmann brains can only exist where life is possible. So what one does in cosmology is look at the multiverse regions where life is possible and counts the number of Boltzmann brains versus ordinary observers. There are models that pass the test. Now, I think that this is a crucial, again, a philosophical point here, because when I talked about the list of ways in which our expectations for theism come out completely wrong when you compare them to the world, Dr. Craig said, well, but that's not the point. We're not arguing about morality and things like that. But again, that misses the point of my argument. I was not actually putting forward these as strong predictions of theism. I was making the point that there are no strong predictions of theism. It's not that there should be no evil in the world if God exists. It's that you can always wriggle out of the prediction that there should be no evil in the world if God exists. That's why it's not a good theory of the world generally. That is why it's not a good cosmological model particularly. And now,
well, it's sort of that any problem that this model encounters can be explained away with a stance-based position from the creator, right? So it's like how art is subjective. You can't make any predictions about how art's going to turn out because anything that turns out is just a choice of the person that made it. It's completely, and it can be, not necessarily, but can be completely and utterly arbitrary. So anything that's completely and utterly arbitrary, you can't have any predictive power on that. And theology doesn't.
I also like another point that he touched on and then moved along, because he's very deftly making, like, touching points and then just going, instead of delving in the way, many debaters, particularly those used to dealing with theists, often do. And it was that the assortment of planetary atmospheres. And that resonated with me, especially with that probability distribution thing. Like, the exoplanets that we've observed so far, most of them are Jupiters, Jovian-type planets. Part of that is a selection bias because they're big and easier to spot, but we don't fully understand planetary formation yet. So we look at our solar system and we say, okay, we have one rocky planet with no atmosphere, another rocky planet with a shit ton of atmosphere, another rocky planet with very little atmosphere, but apparently just enough for life to exist, and then a smaller off to the edge, and then all of a sudden, boom, Jupiter. We have no freaking idea why. We don't know at all. Because the other solar systems we observe, sometimes Jupiter is in an orbit closer than Mercury is in our own system. Yeah. And sometimes there's multiple Jupiters, whereas ours, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, that's not always the case. Sometimes the bigger Jupiter is further out than closer in. We don't know what the fuck is behind it all.
I mean, we're unusual to start with. Most stars are binary, and ours isn't. Was it binary at some point? We don't know. Like, there's so much we don't know. We may have, and we think we found a sister star, one that was sort of a star that was formed at the same time as ours. It's roughly the same dimensions. It's roughly the same mass. What was that at one point? The binary sister of our star? We don't know. We have no idea. like this is the thing. Like you don't know these things, but just sort of saying, well, that's how a god designed it. It doesn't explain why the planets are where they are, or why they have the mass they have, or why they have the makeup that you're describing, Ember. It doesn't get you there. All you've done is just replace "we don't know" with "we don't know why this being did it," and then and the worry that I have is then you stop investigating. You're just like, well, that's the way he made it. Shrug.
Mm-hmm. When you pretend to have answers, you stop looking for the real answers.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. Did you come up with that? That's a really good saying.
I've been using it for a while. I don't know if I originated it or not. It's just been there forever.
Yeah, on your head. Yeah. No, I like it. Well, wherever it came from, I like it.
Like said that we shouldn't expect to know things about the world simply because we say that God finely tuned it. Just because.
Sounds slightly Aaron Ra-ish, Aaron Ra-ish, to be honest with you. It really does. Just saying.
Under theism, he says, God made the parameters of the universe such to allow us to allow life to exist, doesn't mean we can have any other expectation for predicting what those parameters are. This reflects something he said on his website earlier. In a similar context, he said, suppose God is more like the cosmic artist, who wants to splash his canvas with the extravagance of design, who enjoys creating this fabulous cosmos, designing fantastic detail for observers. So what this attitude is saying is that, well, my point is that this is not some sort of sophisticated apologetic strategy. This is an admission of defeat. This is saying we should never expect theism to explain why the universe is one way rather than some other way. God is an artist. Artists are kind of quirky and unpredictable.
Oh, wow, I've just brought this up, didn't I?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Clearly God whispered in your ear.
Oh, yeah, I'm a prophet.
or you're a prophet. One of those.
Yeah. If you want your future, send $5 care of, Mark Reed at Gmail. No, No, I just thought the same thing. Like, you can, I was applying to art rather than artists, but he's right. If you make it completely arbitrary, then we have no reason for anything. It's just, yeah.
We can't expect to know what they're going to do ahead of time. Anything you might possibly observe about the universe, according to this view, I can explain as saying that is what God would have done. In naturalism, on the other hand, you need to play by the rules. When we say in cosmology or physics that a certain parameter is finely tuned, it's not just that the parameter looks funny to us, it's that we have a prior set of expectations for what values the parameter should take on, and the parameter doesn't fit those expectations. So we look for physical models that explain it. And that drive to understand things better helps us understand physics better, helps us understand the real world better. So unlike God, who's an artist and can't be predicted, nature is not an artist. Nature plays by the rules. Nature makes predictions. Nature provides explanations. Thank you.
Woo. Well, that's about halfway through the video. I might call it there. I'm sorry. We are so. Why do we tangent so much, Ember? What is either A, wrong with us, or right with us? One of the two. I don't know whether.
Why not both? But I don't know that we didn't really tangent all that much this time. It was more.
There was a lot to unpack, right?
Yeah. There was a lot to talk about on the various points.
Yeah, so I think that I think that I don't know. I don't like William Lane Craig's approach here. I think he's tripped into the pool of cosmology, and he's just so unequipped for Carroll here. But understandably so. I'm not holding that against him. He's a philosopher. I think that he's gone to some sort of cosmology people and gotten some quotes and things like that, but he's not understanding how they actually apply. And so when he's quoting Sean Carroll, it's easy for Sean Carroll to stand up and say, hey, this is what I actually meant, and then completely undermine his point. He can say, hey, this is what these people meant. So and it's funny that he sort of put in, me calculating probabilities isn't God of the gaps. It's like, well, the lady doth protest too much, methinks.
And especially with like nothing positive on his own side. Right. All he's done, Strumman notwithstanding, is try to discredit the physics side. He's offered nothing that supports his assertions that theism is more probable. He's just said it.
Yeah.
Like, best case scenario, if he were right about everything, which he is very much not, the best case scenario is you end up with we're not sure.
So if it was a debate as can naturalism explain the origin of the universe? He would win, hands down, right? He would absolutely win that, because naturalism can't explain the origin of the universe. That doesn't mean that we go to a supernatural origin, and it doesn't mean that natural processes aren't responsible. It just means that at the moment we can't explain it. This is the whole problem, that he thinks that all he has to do is say, hey, naturalism can't explain it, and therefore it's more problem. No, nothing works like that, sir. Nothing works like that. You can't sort of have a murder investigation with people around and say, oh, well, because I've eliminated this one person, then it's this guy on the street that did it. No, you need evidence that they actually did it, not just sort of saying, hey, well, my main suspect isn't right, it must be this other one. That isn't how it works. You need to give evidence that that person actually did it. And ideally, that person would be found not guilty. Ideally, but, if the court system actually worked properly and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know that sort of circumstantial evidence has convicted people, but it shouldn't, is the whole point. Circumstantial evidence should never convict somebody. It shouldn't. No, it's not going. I'll take it off the screen. I'm sorry, Tsunami. I think you're probably going to do the part 2, Ember, if you want. If not, that's cool. I can leave it for a fortnight and do a part 2 if you want. So you do whatever you want. I'm more than happy. I do owe my favorite weasel an email, and I'll certainly send that. See if I can get a debate with some flat earthers going, because I would love to see Dr. Tapioca Weasel step into the ring with some flat earthers. I would enjoy that a lot, to be honest with you. A lot. So yeah, that'd be fun. Well, Maya, I tell you what, I'll look around for anywhere I can send people. I think what we need to do is sort of tell everybody that you need to turn on your ability to select other people's
Looks
streams.
Like
What's it? Nitty is on, yeah. So I'm just gonna quickly go in here and see if anybody else turned on. But there's something. Help me out here, Ember. There's a setting that you turn on that you can sort of just send everybody over to somebody else, and I can't remember exactly what it's. Redirect.
Oh, yeah, redirect in the customization. No, I'm distracted because Nitty's got his animated avatar working again. He told me he was going to try to fix it so he could use it again, and yeah, animated Nitty is going.
So yeah, Nitty is on. So I'll put up a redirect to Nitty. There we go. Save that. So yeah, so once I end, we will send you over to Nidius Maximus, who is just a gorgeous person. So but that was cool. I really enjoyed that. I remember liking this debate. I didn't remember all of it. Actually, I didn't remember any of it. This was years and years ago I saw this. So really good, really good. But yeah, I'll whatever you decide to do, I'm sure we'll get to it. Have you got anything coming up, Ember? What have you got on the docket?
Oh, jeebus, I've got so much coming up. So tomorrow, I'll be on R and Roz as usual for Joseph Smith. I've got Thomas Off the Chain Atheist coming over for the normal Sunday show. We're gonna try a round 2 with him because last time he was supposed to be on, he lost power and didn't get it back till the next day. And then of course I'll come hang out at Bad Science Sunday as per usual. Monday, I should just open up the thing and look. Monday, I've got Uncle Bobby from Gin and Truth dropping by at 3 in the afternoon Eastern time. He likes early stuff, and then there's a couple other shows. Doc Dino usually does Creation Science Theater. I may drop in for that.
I want to.
What the Beck is doing regular shows again. I'll probably drop in for that. Those aren't my shows. I'm just saying, shout outs because of stuff I like Bad Science Sunday. Tuesday, I've got a interview at Captive Desk or a review or something like that.
I
But yeah.
saw that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave at Captive Desk is interviewing you. Yeah,
Yeah. Wednesday.
I got to make that.
The room rumble. I came up with an E themed version because my name doesn't work out to room rumble as well. But that'll be right before Blasphemous Bible over at Aaron's.
Okay.
Thursday, Lawrence
So
from
who are you
Milwaukee
thinking
Atheist.
of gate crashing? Who are you thinking of gate crashing kind of thing?
What do you mean?
Well, the room rumble is going into a room and sort of taking on everybody in the room. Is that what you're doing, or
it's
is it just...
it's the recording from Amy Newman's when Sunflower Storm did.
Oh, I see.
Well,
Yeah,
technically
gotcha.
Sunflower was there before me, but details.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no. So from Amy's, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's just a recording, but it has its uses. But yeah, Thursday, Lawrence from Milwaukee Atheists, also on Aaron's show. He's coming over so I've got 3 Atheist Lives episodes this next week. Last week I had none, this week I have 3. It's awesome. Friday, Stephanie and Bree will be joining me again for a transgender Q&A night, because we did yesterday we did the propaganda about Dawkins and Joyce interview, and a lot of people said, this is great information, but I still have so many questions I don't understand. So we're doing a Q&A night. Saturday, back with Mark for more debate review stuff. And so, yeah, I literally have stuff every single day this coming week.
Nice.
I'm a busy NB person.
Well, I'll probably make Dr. Dino's review. I'm working on some stuff. I've got actually probably about 2 or 3 room rumbles that I have recorded to release, including one that was going on Skylar Fiction's show and arguing with him, which was funny. So a lot of stuff happening. So I've got to release them over the week, and so there'll be some rumbles going up. I'm interviewing Bree this week for my interview, the proofread. She's going to be talking about Gaia and the interconnectedness of all living things. So that should be really cool. And I want to see what she's got to bring to the table. And of course we love Bree. So Hive Science will be in the reading room, giving the proofread. And it should be lots of fun. And I would really love to make that Bad Science show on Mayors, because look, you had me at Worm Hat, Dr. Tapioca Weasel. You had me at Worm Hat. You people sleep at weird times. All right, you're weird. You sleep at weird times. And yeah, I'm feeling a lot better, so I think I should be able to make it. But I'll keep an eye out for it. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. You're all wonderful. Don't forget to be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other, and always
don't forget to like and subscribe and things.
Like, subscribe, people.
Hey, look at that.
I have messages that I'm supposed to put up every time. I'm so sorry, everybody. Like, seriously, what is it? What is it about me that I remember all of this on somebody else's channel? When it's my channel, I'm just got pressure. I can't remember.
It happens.
So I've got another name to add to that. Somebody that joined today, which was the marvelous Kiwi Burb. The troll Kiwi is in the house. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Proof that burbs aren't real.
Proof that burbs. Wormhat, why do you do this to me? Anyway, take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you in the next one. See you, people.